Story 1.
My cheating wife secretly met her ex-boyfriend, so I taught them both a lesson they won't forget. Mr. De La Cruz just ended a phone call looking really happy. Using my skills, I moved over $10 million through 4 countries and 12 banks, successfully handling his funds and protecting him from government scrutiny. I'm Tony Cardone, known and respected for my expertise in moving money, hiding funds, and keeping people safe from legal issues. I don't ask where the money comes from, and I don't interfere with their business. To protect myself from legal issues and stay morally upright, I follow a simple rule. Don't ask questions to avoid being lied to. My work has earned me a good income. Using my strategies, I have 16 bank accounts in 8 countries, 10 crypto wallets, and a company that manages my house, cars, bills, and expenses. I receive a $50,000 annual salary from the company, which I use for unexpected expenses. The company makes a small profit yearly to stay legal and protect me from civil suits, lawsuits, or divorces by showing minimal net worth and income. Many clients appreciate my value and offer me things I can't accept as thanks for solving their money problems, such as women, medications, trips, protection, and more. Until now, I haven't taken anything from them. My current situation requires me to accept help with surveillance, protection, and some force-related aspects. Business friends were glad to assist and thank me for my work. My wife Jen sees me as a financial advisor, not knowing my earnings, funds, or offshore accounts. She knows the company covers our mortgage, cars, and expenses. She hasn't asked because she doesn't need to work, drives a new luxury car yearly, and has an unlimited budget for shopping and entertainment. I thought Jen was happy and loved being with me. Throughout our 5-year marriage, we had satisfying and frequent closeness, making it feel like paradise. But apparently, my paradise is about to face a Category 5 hurricane. Jen and I dated for 2 years, got married at 25, and have been married for 5 years. Jen just turned 30, with attractive features that make her a dream trophy wife. Blonde hair and amazing blue eyes can charm any man. Despite constant attention, she proudly displays her marital status. Before we married, I found out she dated a man named Josh Winters in college. She was madly in love with him, but he enlisted in the Marines, and their relationship eventually fizzled out. Now I've learned that, 8 years later, Josh Winters left the military and came back to our city. Jen couldn't move on from her feelings for him. When Josh finished his 2 tours, he naturally reached out to old friends, including my wife. Jen had always been enchanted by him, and after getting her cell phone number from a mutual friend, he texted and called, trying to reconnect like in the past. Jen started acting differently about 6 weeks ago, probably feeling guilty about her secret communication with Josh. She engaged in excessive attention and additional closeness activities with me, which was pleasant but unusual for Jen. Although she was always cheerful, it was evident from her actions that something had changed. I didn't wait and paid closer attention to Jen. During a weekend barbecue, a friend mentioned Josh, stating he was back in town. I inquired about when he returned, and it coincided with the changes I observed in Jen. The next day, I called a business friend, informed him of the situation, and mentioned I might need his help. He was excited to help me, considering the money I made for him and how I kept him out of trouble with the feds. I provided names and information, and he assured me they would contact me soon. Who knows what these guys do? However, they swiftly provided me with a full dossier on Josh Winters, containing almost his entire life history, from a copy of his birth certificate to college records, family tree, and military records. I knew more about this guy than his own mother. I also received a daily printout of his text messages, including over 15 messages per day to my wife. I was told not to ask where they got this information. Initially, the messages were friendly, what you'd expect from an old friend. However, after the first week, they became close. I was relieved to see Jen halt his advances, but after another week of his persistence, he managed to overcome the barriers and she began to flirt back. My anger grew because I knew Jen still had feelings for him, and I sensed trouble ahead. After 4 weeks of flirting and texting, he convinced Jen to meet him for lunch. Shockingly, he even had the audacity to ask her to wear something handsome for him because he missed her so much. To my horror, she agreed and even asked if she should forget her underwear. My anger reached a level I hadn't felt in a long time. Just like old times, I sought advice from my business partners on how to deal with this situation. We agreed it would be best for me to meet them face-to-face during their lunch, with someone nearby for protection if needed. We knew exactly when and where they would meet, thanks to my friend's surveillance group assisting me with this problem. Entering the restaurant, I found them in a secluded area. Jen wore a revealing dress with a low cut and no bra, making me furious again. They sat together in a private booth with their backs to the restaurant, looking pretty cozy. I noticed a man following me, whom I assumed was one of my bodyguards. Approaching their table, my wife and her friend looked at me when I greeted them casually and slid into the booth across from them. The large man who had been watching me now sat 3 tables away, looking at Jen with a friendly smile. I inquired if my wife would introduce me to her friend, sensing the tension in the air as I locked eyes with Jen. Josh appeared confused when he glanced at me, while my wife displayed a mix of shock and guilt. They continued sitting side by side, holding hands on the table. Once she realized the situation, she attempted to free her hand from Josh's grasp, but he held it tightly, giving me a knowing smirk that conveyed he wasn't backing down. My wife nervously introduced Josh as Josh Winters and gestured towards me, her husband, Tony. I'd never seen her so uneasy. Josh seemed amused, maintaining a silent confidence as if to communicate, "I've got your wife, and there's nothing you can do about it, buddy." Remaining composed, I addressed Jen, expressing my need to talk to her privately for a few minutes. I requested him to let her step away from the table. He reluctantly let go of her hand, allowing her to leave the booth. She stood up, clutching her purse to her chest, standing between Josh and me, appearing scared and worried. I took her hand and led her to the back of the restaurant towards the restrooms. Still nervous and feeling guilty about being caught with Josh, she walked quietly without saying a word. I pulled her into the empty men's room and started addressing the situation. I mentioned her lack of a bra and the revealing dress, expressing confusion and hurt about her apparent disrespect. She stood there, shedding tears without uttering a word. Then I raised the hem of her dress to verify the absence of underwear. Seeing my expression change from horror to rage, she observed as I held the dress above her waist and turned her to face the mirror, forcing her to confront her reflection. I pointed out the lack of underwear, expressing my dissatisfaction with her dressing when I'm not around. She screamed, pulling her dress down to cover herself. She insisted, "No, it's not what it looks like." "I know it sounds bad, but I have a good explanation and you will understand." I promised to explain. In a commanding and stern tone, unlike anything she had heard from me before, I spoke slowly, emphasizing every word. I communicated the need for a discussion and laid out the terms, making it clear that if she wanted any hope of remaining married, she needed to comply with my directives. Otherwise, our marriage would end immediately. "You're going to grab your purse, walk out looking straight ahead without acknowledging your boyfriend, go straight to your car, drive home, put on the coffee pot, and wait for me to come back. I'll be no more than 10 minutes late. Don't text or call your boyfriend or anyone until we talk. I'll talk to your boyfriend and explain why you had to leave." I noticed she avoided eye contact, probably feeling guilty about getting caught. "And one more thing, when you arrive home, don't change your clothes. Stay in this dress and wait for me in the same way. If you don't follow my request, don't bother coming home tonight. I'll call you later and explain how things will develop from now on." Oh my God, what have I done? When Josh approached me, I was relieved to find out he was safe and no longer in the military, as I had always worried about his well-being. Josh was my first love, and it took me a long time to get over him. Even though we went our separate ways after he left me years ago, and there was no longer any love between us, thoughts of him lingered. I am certain I love Tony, my life partner since we met. I would never want to lose him or cause him pain. That's why this situation is so challenging. Darn it, Josh started flirting and saying things he knew would provoke me. He had a way of making me feel like a schoolgirl and doing things against my will. I despised that I couldn't resist. I tried to push him away, but his persistent flirting and suggestive messages wore me down until I eventually agreed to meet him for lunch. Talking to him made me feel guilty and mean. I knew I shouldn't be doing this, and I should have told Tony about Josh's return and our conversations. But I kept it a secret, and the regret is overwhelming. Josh has a knack for making me feel connected to him. When he asked me to wear something handsome, I agreed, knowing it was wrong and that I shouldn't even be going to lunch with him, let alone wearing that dress. Yet, I did it. What made me suggest going without underwear? Am I truly that shallow and foolish? Yes. When we dated, he always insisted I go without them. When he invited me to lunch, old memories flooded back and it felt normal. I almost declined due to guilt, but a text from Josh saying he couldn't wait changed my course. It was tough not telling Tony, but I thought one dinner for old time's sake wouldn't be a big deal. Just a couple of hours, just like old times, just like he said. Josh knew how to persuade me, even when I resisted. To be honest, when I saw him in the restaurant, I felt a certain desire. Our chemistry was special, and now he looked even better than I remembered. 8 years in the Marine Corps sculpted muscles that any woman would admire. My face turned red as he kissed me on the cheek and helped me into a private booth. It felt like old times, laughter, happiness, and excitement. When he held my hand on the table, I felt safe and warm. We were there for just a few minutes, laughing and enjoying ourselves when, out of nowhere, Tony appeared in front of us. Suddenly, he sat down right in front of us with a sadistic smile, sending a chill down my spine. My heart stopped as I realized the gravity of my actions. When Tony saw us holding hands, my world crumbled. I saw pain and anger in his eyes, and I wanted to jump over the table, hug him, and tell him how much I loved him, easing his pain. I could never intentionally hurt Tony, but that's exactly what happened. The way he looked at me with disgust and contempt shattered my heart. The man I love, who I've been with for the last 5 years, saw me with another man, an old flame. I was paralyzed and speechless, not knowing what to do. When Tony said he wanted to talk, my heart sank, anticipating the end of our relationship. As he pulled me into the men's room, I didn't know what to expect. When he lifted my dress to reveal I wasn't wearing underwear, I nearly fainted. I can only imagine what he was thinking in that moment. I felt like a fallen and unfaithful wife. When he told me to go home and wait for him, the gravity of his words scared me. I knew I had to listen to save our marriage and make him understand why I did this. I need to fix this and agree with whatever he says. When he mentioned talking to Josh alone, I got worried for Tony. Josh is much bigger and has 8 years of Marine training. I feared Tony might get hurt. I wanted to tell him not to do it, but I felt confused. I tried to apologize, but Tony insisted I go home, saying he would be there soon. When he told me not to change clothes, I realized I was in trouble, and explaining my actions would be difficult. How did I let Josh convince me to do this? I didn't want him in my life. I just wanted to reminisce and have some fun. From Tony's perspective, though, I looked like I was about to have a bed life with Josh. Darn it, how can I fix this? I felt like everyone was watching me as I walked to my car. I didn't dare look at Josh, and I knew he wondered where I was going. It took a few minutes before I stopped crying enough to drive home. It felt like the longest trip ever. Seeing the pain in Tony's eyes made me cry again. How could I do this to him? I can't believe I let Josh manipulate me like that. Now I have to make Tony understand and forgive me. Darn it, I'm in such a mess, all because of Josh and my stupidity. When I got home, I made coffee and wondered about their conversation. How long before Tony comes home? Will he be angry? Can I salvage our marriage? I need to. I don't want to live without Tony, and he must know he's the only one I love. I went back to the table and talked to Josh. Well, it seems Jen won't be returning, and I just wanted to talk to you. You must know she still has feelings for you and is easily manipulated, as you've seen today and over the past few weeks. But understand, she's married to me, and I won't share her. I'm not possessive or reckless. Today, I decided to give Jen a choice, either stay in our marriage or leave me for you, but not both. She would decide without your influence. I expressed that if she chose him, so be it. However, if she wanted to stay, she would have to cut contact with him. I made it clear that if he didn't hear from her today, he shouldn't call or text again. I emphasized that she was a grown woman making her own decisions and didn't belong to him. He confidently asserted that she would be with him again, claiming she couldn't resist their past, smirking the same way as before. In response, I addressed Josh, expressing hope that he would be reasonable. I acknowledged his attractiveness and size, suggesting there were plenty of single women interested in him. I questioned why individuals like him couldn't leave married women alone. I proceeded to reveal my knowledge about him and his life, mentioning details such as his parents' names, the love for their dogs, the duration since he last saw his sister in Austin, and his best friend Billy's girlfriend being pregnant with a boy. I pointed out his persistence in text messages to Jen and warned him that my work friends, who owed me a lot, were ruthless. I challenged him, stating that tonight would determine who the better man was. I mentioned my willingness to be objective and respect her choice, even if she picked him. I asserted that I wouldn't live with a woman who desired another man and wouldn't share her. Although it would be painful, I preferred to let her go and move on in the event that she chose to remain faithful. I outlined that there would be changes, as both of them had damaged my trust, and it needed to be rebuilt. I informed him that if she stayed with me, he would have no more contact, no texts, emails, calls, or reaching out to friends. He would vanish from her life. If you happen to see her in a restaurant, turn and walk away. At a party or club, leave if you spot her. Don't try anything behind my back or contact her, as the pain you'll feel will be beyond anything you've experienced. Your loved ones will pay for your stupidity. Do you understand what I said? Do you grasp how serious I am? Josh sat there stunned, not knowing what to think. How do you know so much about my family and my life? Like I said, I have friends who owe me favors, and they're not people you want to get involved with. I might seem meek, but there's more to me than meets the eye. Are you really going to offer her a chance to leave you for me? I keep my word. Yes. If she were any other woman who disrespected me like today, I'd have kicked her out. But I love her, and I'll give her one chance. If you're right and she can't resist you, by midnight she'll contact you. The other choice is to forget you, keep my vows, and remain her faithful husband. If she stays, you'll be dead to her. No more interference in our marriage. Josh expressed his belief that I should keep my word about letting them live in peace, because, according to him, she would want to be with him. He claimed she had told him as much and emphasized how much she desired him, attempting to sound confident. His fooling made me wonder if there was any truth to his words, a question that would be answered soon. As I left, the man in the shadows stood up, cast an angry look at Josh, and then departed. A minute after my departure, Josh received a message indicating that I had a bodyguard, challenging the assumption that I was an innocent, meek husband. While driving home, I pondered whether the woman I loved would ever be in my bed again. I questioned whether she would choose him and leave me, or remain true to her vows. Upon entering the house, the atmosphere was quiet. She sat nervously at the kitchen table, tears in her eyes. Pouring myself coffee, I took a seat across from her. I addressed Jen, stating that I knew everything, including her texts to Josh. I mentioned having friends in my business who owed me favors, individuals she would prefer not to meet. Despite her apologies, I conveyed that they were now meaningless. She had betrayed my love, and her actions that day had shown a level of disrespect for me as her husband that I had never anticipated. You know me, and I've made it clear that I won't tolerate living with a woman who doesn't respect me, our vows, and the sanctity of our marriage. In my world, cheating extends beyond the physical. Even the mere thought of being with another man is a betrayal. Actions such as engaging in conversations with Josh, wearing a provocative dress without a bra, and suggesting not wearing underwear, all of these are considered lies. The act of sitting together and holding hands, especially in my eyes, constitutes treason. Collectively, these actions indicate that you gave your love to a man outside our marriage. Admittedly, there was no kissing, which is the sole reason we are still having this conversation. However, I want to make it clear that I will never share you, and I won't tolerate a cheating wife. I know you were close to Josh, and I understand you still have feelings for him. However, you're married to me, and I won't share you with him or anyone else. I haven't asked you to leave because I love you deeply and will do anything to keep us together. Before we continued, I had a question. Don't lie, I might already know. While sitting with him without underwear, did he touch you? Has anyone else in our marriage touched you there? No, I swear, never. Only you, she said. Today, she was willing to let him. I questioned her, and she lowered her head, crying and apologizing for her actions. She expressed regret and asked for forgiveness. I acknowledged that, apart from a few handshakes and text messages, nothing had happened to end our marriage. However, I expressed disappointment and questioned her choice of dress, asking if she had planned to seduce him and get him into bed. She denied any intention of sleeping with him, explaining that she wanted to look handsome for him and relive old feelings. Despite understanding her past feelings for Josh, I emphasized that I would never share her with another man and presented her with a choice. I laid out the options. She could choose between Josh and our marriage. If she wanted to be with him, I would let her go, ensuring a fair divorce and safety for both. On the other hand, she could stay in our marriage, remain faithful, and honor our vows. I made it clear that if she chose Josh, she would need to leave the house by the weekend, and I would initiate divorce proceedings. If she chose to stay married, she would have to cut all ties with Josh. I emphasized the gravity of her decision and left her with the ultimatum, stating that she had a get-out-of-jail card but needed to choose wisely. I then left the kitchen, instructing her to sit and think about it. I conveyed that if she chose Josh, I would ask her to leave the house with her belongings by the weekend, initiating divorce proceedings immediately. I made it clear that if she wanted to stay married, she could not be involved with Josh again, emphasizing that he would be dead to her. I reiterated the same demands I had communicated to Josh, ensuring that there should be no possibility of them being in the same place at the same time. She agreed without hesitation. Before leaving the kitchen, I emphasized the gravity of her choice, presenting it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I instructed her to choose between her ex-lover and her loving husband, stating that I needed an answer when I returned from the shower. As I left the kitchen, she spontaneously declared, "Of course I choose you, honey. I love you and don't want anyone else." Despite hearing her words, I insisted that she sit and think about it carefully. If we were to stay married, she would need to rebuild the trust we once had and help me overcome the pain and anger she had caused. I stressed the difficulty of this task and urged her to give me her answer after I returned from the shower. Considering her actions and feelings for Josh, I emphasized that this decision was too significant for her to make without deep inner reflection. After taking my time showering and getting dressed, I returned to the kitchen. She ran up to me, expressing love and remorse, promising never to leave me and vowing to be the perfect wife. She declared her desire to have my children and pleaded for me not to leave her, emphasizing that I was the only man in her life. We shared moments of kissing and hugging, and then I carried her to our bed, feeling a sense of having my wife back. Fueled by anger, my actions led to a closeness encounter with this beautiful woman who willingly surrendered herself to me. She expressed love, urging me to take her, pulling me closer, and kissing me tenderly. We shared a prolonged moment of closeness, reaching emotional highs together. Afterward, we silently embraced for an hour, feeling a sense of reconnection as the world around us faded away. We embraced the roles of husband and wife again, confident that nothing would ever come between us. The following day, Josh concluded, "She didn't call me, so I guess she decided to stay with this idiot. I can't believe this." Our connection and her actions made me think she would want to stay with me. If I could have gotten her into bed that day, she would have left Tony in a heartbeat. As soon as I can do this, she will be mine again. Her husband really messed up my plans. Who is this guy, and how does he know so much about me and my family? Well, I'm not done yet, and I think I can get her back. Sorry, Tony, but you're going to lose this girl. A few days later, idiot Josh finally texted Jen, trying to convince her to leave me and be with him, which didn't surprise me. The good news was that Jen showed me the text message and didn't respond to it. I told her I had already seen his message and was glad she didn't respond. Showing me the text was a smart step towards repairing our trust issues. The following day, I sent a text to Josh, inquiring about his parents' success in finding Casey and Mickey. Josh promptly called his parents, learning about their distress upon discovering the dogs were missing. He realized that his involvement with Jen had hurt his parents, despite my previous warning. To emphasize the seriousness of the situation, I made the dogs disappear for a few days under close supervision. After my warning, Josh called me back immediately after speaking with his parents, expressing anger and concern. He demanded to know what I had done and issued a threat, stating that if the dogs weren't alive, he would do bad things to me. I responded by reminding him of my earlier warning not to mess with Jen and emphasizing the pain he would feel if he got involved with her. I assured him it was just a temporary disruption and that the dogs would be back soon. However, I made it clear that this was his final warning and insisted that he never contact Jen again. Josh acknowledged the warning but stressed that the dogs had better come back in good shape since he had ignored my earlier instructions. I declared my intention to take whatever actions I deemed necessary, and Josh would have to face the consequences. In response to his threat, I informed him that the return of the dogs was uncertain, as his tone did not inspire mercy. I contemplated whether they would come back at all. Emphasizing his disrespectful tone, I suggested that perhaps his parents should know the reason their puppies had gone missing, teasing the idea of calling them. Josh, realizing the severity of the situation, apologized and pleaded for the return of the dogs, promising to stay away. I accepted his apology but warned that next time it wouldn't be the dogs disappearing. He agreed to stay out of Jen's life, and I assured him that the dogs would be back soon. However, I reminded him of my physical distance and lack of control over everything, stating that the people involved had their own opinions. I promised to discuss the matter with them and see what could be done. I expressed my hope that we wouldn't need to have another conversation, warning Josh that if we did, he would be dealing with much more significant issues. At 3 the next night, Josh's parents experienced tears of joy upon the return of their beloved dogs, who were barking on their porch. Unaware of what had transpired and that their son had been involved, they felt immense relief. Josh, upon hearing the news, expressed relief at the return of the dogs and sent me a brief thank you message. Subsequently, he grasped the gravity of the situation, distanced himself from Jen, and secured a job in another city several hours away. Despite attempting to gather more information about me, Josh could only access public details indicating that I worked as a financial advisor. Realizing that additional information was sealed, he decided to move on and start a new life, severing ties with his old flame. Concerned about the possibility of Josh re-entering her life, I took proactive measures. 2 weeks after the incident, I presented Jen with a postnuptial agreement drafted by my lawyer. The agreement outlined her willingness to relinquish everything, including rights to any children born during our marriage, in the event of infidelity. While it couldn't prevent a recurrence of her previous encounter with Josh, it provided ample incentive for her to consider the consequences. Given my increased attention and the knowledge that I would consistently check in on her, alongside the postnuptial agreement, we faced any potential challenges that lay ahead. Approximately a year later, Jen became pregnant with our first child, and the couple grew closer than ever. Recognizing the close call that nearly jeopardized her life, Jen committed herself to making me happy and strengthening our family. The specter of Josh gradually faded, and it seemed as if he had never existed. Despite the potential for irreparable damage in a single day, my love and approach toward challenges played a pivotal role in saving our marriage.
Story 2.
I exposed my wife's cheating in front of everyone by waiving divorce papers and a DNA test. So here's the deal about me, John T. Miller. My buddies all call me JT. I ditched the corporate grind 8 years back to start my own business, and it's been a success story ever since. Now Dawn's the breadwinner at a major company, climbing the ladder for 24 years since right after we got hitched. She's in their education sector now, keeping up with tech advancements with a ton of training each year. At 46, she's stunning. Doesn't look a day over 30 and still turns heads. She's 5 feet 8 inches, a mere 118 lbs, and you'd never guess she's a mom of 2. She's up with the sun, pounding the pavement for 6 miles with her running crew from our neighborhood. Our daughter, Emily, a 22-year-old FSU grad, teaches first grade down in Naples and has picked up her mom's running habit. She's even got a taste for my home-brewed beer and found a club for it. I join her when I can. Kent, our son, is wrapping up his last year at UF, eyeing a spot in my company. But I've told him he's got to get some outside experience first, 5 years minimum. Dawn's not into beer, hates the smell when I'm brewing, so I time my batches for when she's on her work trips. She's off in Dallas now, so I'm crafting an English brown ale back home. Life seemed too good to be true, and boy was I about to find out just how true that was. A buddy from my beer club, Bobby, needed a lift from the airport. Easy enough, right? But as I waited in baggage claim, I spotted some of Dawn's colleagues. Odd. Dawn wasn't with them, so I called her office line, something I hadn't done in ages. Her voicemail confirmed she was supposed to be in Dallas, but here were her colleagues without her. Puzzled, I met up with Bobby, shared my confusion, and he suggested I get in touch with Steve, another club member who happens to be a detective. Before ringing Steve, I tried Dawn, playing it cool. She fed me some line about having to stay behind for work, but it didn't add up. I ended up calling Steve, despite the late hour. I didn't beat around the bush, told him straight that I thought Dawn was playing me for a fool. He promised to help after I explained the whole airport situation and Dawn's fishy voicemail. I had this sinking feeling that my happy life was just an illusion. So I had this chat with Steve, a detective buddy of mine from the beer club, about the whole Dawn situation. I laid it all out for him, her travel schedule, her routine when she gets back, and my gut feeling that something was off. Steve figured there might be something fishy going on too, and he pointed me to a private investigator, Frank Jones, to dig deeper. The next day, Frank gives me a ring and we go over everything. He's straight with me, asking if I'm sure I want to uncover what's potentially a messy situation. Do I want to know the truth, no matter what? How far back should he look? And am I ready to face whatever comes out of this? It hit me hard, but I was adamant. I needed to know if I'd been played for a sucker, no matter what it took or what it would cost. So Frank's going to get someone in Dallas to shadow Dawn, and his team will snoop around the training schedules and touch base with those instructors from the airport. Meanwhile, he tells me to play detective at home. I'm not sure what I'm looking for, but I start with Dawn's dresser, nothing unusual there. Her closet's next, packed with boxes, but I decide to hit the bathroom first. Again, nothing stands out. Back in the closet, I go through her clothes, shoeboxes, everything. But there's nothing that screams secret affair or anything weird. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack without knowing if there's even a needle to find. After turning my place upside down, the master bedroom, guest room, den, garage, and even the attic, I was no closer to the truth. That's when Frank showed up, loaded with spy gear. We rigged the house with cameras and recorders, turned Dawn's car into a tracking device, and then kicked back with a cold one while Frank filled me in. Turns out DA teaching gigs are all over the place, sometimes 3 days, other times 5. The Dallas class? A 3-day stint. Her colleagues Tom, Paul, and Bev, they all flew back on Wednesday night, no fuss. Dawn's supposed to be just teaching, not handling any of the classroom grunt work. As I sat there boiling with rage, I remembered something my dad used to say about keeping your cool, but man, it's tough. Dawn's been feeding me lies, and I'm determined to see her face the music. The house search turned up zilch except for the fact that Dawn always rushed to wash her clothes as soon as she got back. That struck us as odd. We hatched a plan. Frank would grab Dawn's luggage at the airport, and I'd find a way to bust the washing machine so it wouldn't start up right away. Frank headed out, promising his Dallas buddy was on Dawn's trail and would report back pronto. I couldn't stomach the thought of sleeping in our bed, so I crashed in Kent's room, tossing and turning all night. Next morning, I stuck to my usual routine, hit the office to clear my head. Frank buzzed me around lunchtime, and we planned a rendezvous at my place. He showed up at 2, arms laden with files. The Dallas detective had come through, a full report, photos included. The plot was thickening, and I braced myself for whatever those files would reveal. Frank had this photo, right? Of 6 people having a good time at a dinner table, 3 men, 3 women, all paired up. He wanted to know if I recognized anyone. I squinted hard at that picture, and yeah, the only face I knew was Dawn's. He passed me some close-ups, and after a good long look, I tell him one of the guys looks kind of familiar, but I couldn't place him. Frank's next reveal was something out of a spy movie. They had cameras set up in the hotel, watching. Hallways, catching every move. These photos he had showed the whole group from the dinner leaving the restaurant, cramming into an elevator, and all of them getting off at the same floor. The ladies went into one room and the guys into another right next door. Come Friday morning, there's a snapshot of 2 women leaving one room, 2 men the other, and then all of them breezing through the lobby and out the door. They looked like colleagues or maybe old pals, nothing shady. After hitting up a nearby restaurant, they all settled their own tabs and headed back to the hotel to grab their stuff and check out. Frank's looking at me like he's about to drop a bombshell, asking if I'm dead sure I want the full Monty. Without skipping a beat, I tell him to lay it on me. He's got another file, and as he walks me through it, the Dallas crew had gone into those rooms with the cleaners, filming the whole 9 yards. Here's the kicker. Those 2 rooms, they're connected. They swiped the sheets for DNA, collected used glasses for prints, and dug through the trash. I'm bracing myself for whatever those tests are going to say. The waiting's the hardest part, knowing that these bits and pieces could piece together a picture of Dawn I never wanted to see. The Dallas Pie gave us the rundown. Those hotel rooms were a mess, a clear sign of a wild night. We're talking about all 4 beds used and stained, the air thick with the scent of sex. We're waiting on lab tests to confirm the details, but in my gut, I already knew Dawn was more than just a bystander. It felt like a punch to the gut, realizing the woman I married could betray me like this. So what's next? Dawn's coming home tonight, and first things first, we've got to sabotage the washing machine. That's our move to keep her from washing away any evidence. It felt kind of good getting my hands dirty, cutting the wire, a distraction maybe, to cool the boiling anger. Back in the kitchen, Frank's getting DNA samples, mine, the kids, and he's digging through Dawn's hairbrush. When he asks for hair from the kids, a chill runs down my spine. Could it be? He's just crossing off items on a checklist, but the thought of my kids not being mine? That's another level of betrayal. We've got baby hair clippings saved up. 1 from each kid should do the trick. Frank's got another plan. Nab Dawn's luggage at the airport. Buy us some time with her bag missing. She'll be late, wrapped up in reporting it. That gives me space to get my head straight. And then the real act begins. Can I hug her, kiss her, sit through her stories like nothing's wrong? Can I take her out, sleep with her, all while knowing what I know? It's a performance that might need to last months while Frank's team does their thing, unraveling Dawn's secrets. Could I pull it off? Could I live with the lies, the facade, just to get to the truth? I told Frank, yeah, I'll do it. I have to. The truth is all that matters now, no matter how long it takes or how much it hurts. Frank's wheels were turning. He had a plan. He wondered if I could head out on a business trip. Something to throw Dawn off. Maybe even catch her in the act if she was messing around. I thought about it, and then it clicked. I could visit a longtime client in St. Louis, tell Dawn I'd be gone from Monday to Thursday, make it sound routine. Why the trip? I asked. Frank laid it out. With me out of town, Dawn might feel free to slip up, especially if she's been having her secret fun on the side. And since we've got no ears in her office, Frank wants to bug something she always has on her. I'm drawing blanks until it hits me, her briefcase. It's not ideal, but it's something. Frank hands me a tiny bug to plant. Later that night, as Frank heads out, he drops one last task on me. Check Dawn's underwear for any signs. Stay cool, he reminds me. I'm trying, but it's like a high-wire act. I'm out on the deck nursing a porter, trying to piece together anything else that might have been off about Dawn. Aside from her laundry routine, nothing comes up. Then, just as I'm about to head in, Frank's on the line. They've snagged Dawn's luggage. It's off to the lab. Remember, keep your head, he says. And that's what I'm clinging to as I prep for the evening's performance. Dawn rolled in, clearly worn out from her trip and fuming over the lost luggage, especially over a couple of pairs of new slacks. But she still found the energy for a loving embrace and the usual "I missed you" routine. Once she went up for her bath, I got the bug secured in her briefcase and tried to relax with some TV. But my mind kept replaying her arrival, trying to pick up on any clues that might give her away. She seemed genuinely glad to be home, which only made my act feel even more strained. I've got to get better at this deception game, or she'll read me like an open book. Pushing those thoughts aside, I got ready for bed, where we'd end up tangled in each other's arms, the usual post-trip ritual. Come Saturday morning, Dawn was out cold, probably because she wasn't stressing over laundry duty, thanks to the missing luggage. And there I was, sneaking a peek at her panties like some kind of creep, hunting for any sign of infidelity. Nothing jumped out at me, they looked just like any other day's laundry. After my own shower, I started the coffee and grabbed the paper, trying to keep things normal. Dawn floated into the kitchen, all smiles and rested, and I laid on the charm, offering her coffee and breakfast. She joked about her luggage, and I had to chuckle along. With breakfast done, I stepped outside to chip away at my to-do list. A while later, Dawn popped out, heading to the store, and I told her I'd be busy with the beer transfer. It's all about maintaining the usual routine, even when everything feels like it's hanging by a thread. Dinner at our usual Italian spot was like a scene from a movie, where the lead characters are pretending everything's normal. We chatted about her trip, my upcoming St. Louis run, and the lost luggage, which she half hoped would stay lost just for the excuse to shop for more, except for those new slacks she liked. I played my part, talking up my latest homebrew venture. After dinner, it was like any other evening before a business trip. The drive to St. Louis was my time to think, and while I usually ponder over business matters, this time Dawn was the only thing on my mind. I checked in with Frank from the road, updating him on the weekend and trying to get a read on his thoughts. No news yet, but he promised to keep in touch as the miles and hours slipped by. I needed to hear Frank's unvarnished take. He didn't sugarcoat it. He and Joe in Dallas both figured Dawn was in deep, likely for years. It wasn't just a one-time thing. These people knew each other too well, their casual demeanor, the way they handled themselves. It all pointed to a long-standing affair. Frank said that outside those hotel rooms, the six of them were just friends, but once the doors closed, it was a different story. They knew how to keep up appearances, and that's what stung the most. It was a long-term act, and I was none the wiser. The last bit of advice from Frank was to make a call, decide what I was going to do about Dawn and this whole mess. That's when I reached out to my lawyer Mike for the contact details of the best divorce attorney around. I brought him up to speed, and he said Dave Ford would be in touch. It's strange how life can take a turn. One day you're sharing homebrew and dinner plans, and the next you're talking to divorce lawyers about the end of a marriage you once thought was bulletproof. Next, I called Mike Davidson, my attorney, and asked him for the name of the best divorce attorney in the state. I gave him a brief update, and he told me he would have Dave Ford call me. Checked into my hotel in St. Louis. I made the routine call home to Dawn, letting her know I landed safely. Everything seemed normal, but beneath the surface, I was arranging the pieces of a different game. I touched base with Fred about our golf plans, trying to maintain the ordinary pattern of a business trip. Frank rang me up later that night, checking in. I let him know that his and Dave Ford's reputations preceded them, and that I was gearing up for whatever came next. This was no longer a defensive play. I was ready to take the field. The next day was a blur of green fairways with Fred, a temporary escape. Frank's midday call on Wednesday found me with an open schedule, ready to head back home the following morning. When Dave Ford, the attorney, and I finally spoke, I briefed him on the situation. He commended the strategy and acknowledged Frank's investigative prowess. The big question from Dave was about my intentions, and I laid it out plainly. If Dawn's cheating, I'm filing for divorce. Yet, I needed the full picture from Frank's investigation to measure just how far I wanted to push back against Dawn and her clandestine group. Dave laid out the legal landscape, explaining a no-fault divorce could be swift and less costly in Georgia, especially since our kids were grown. Adultery charges wouldn't really leverage any advantage. It was a lot to process. I needed time to weigh my options on how to approach the divorce, to decide whether to strike hard or take the path of least resistance. The conversation with Dave was a stark reminder of the legal and emotional maze I was about to navigate. Update: with the unexpected arrival of Frank and Steve at my hotel room, I knew something major was up. Frank's expression was grave as he prepared to deliver the news, and having Steve there suddenly felt like a necessity, a lifeline. When Frank broke the silence, the words hit like a freight train. The lab results were in, and they confirmed Dawn's active role in that sordid hotel scene. It was damning. Each woman, including Dawn, had been with all three men. My heart sank as Frank explained. They matched the DNA from Dawn's hair to the evidence on the beds. I was reeling, lost in a silence that was deafening, my mind racing as I struggled to wrap my head around the betrayal. But it was the next revelation that cut the deepest. Frank's voice was hesitant as he told me that neither of my kids was biologically mine. That scream that tore from my throat was more than shock. It was 24 years of trust, love, and memories shattering in an instant. As I stood there, pacing, raging, I was barely aware of Frank and Steve's presence. My perfect world didn't just collapse, it was obliterated. What was I supposed to do now? Every plan, every next step seemed pointless against the backdrop of a lie that spanned more than 2 decades. Struck by disbelief and battered by the storm of betrayal, I found myself in a whirlwind of emotions. The revelation about Kent and Emily and Dawn's decades-long deceit was more than just bad news. It was a seismic shift in everything I thought I knew about my life. The shock gave way to a cascade of feelings: from the initial disbelief to a cold, hard resolve. Frank was right to deliver this news in person. And Steve's presence was not just for support, it was a necessary anchor to keep me grounded. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, as time seemed to pause, we laid out my options. With Steve and Frank's guidance, I focused on the path forward, on ensuring that this betrayal came at a high cost for all involved. Sleep was a stranger that night, but their company kept me from sinking, kept me focused on what needed to be done. My decision was crystallizing. I would see to it that each person paid for their role in this deception. My divorce from Dawn would not be a silent retreat, it would be a declaration, a public unveiling of her duplicity. Yes, it would drag my own pain into the light, but it would expose the years of lies that had masqueraded as my life. In Georgia, the route of a no-fault divorce seemed a swift way to cut ties, but now it felt too quiet, too gentle for the depth of Dawn's deceit. The straightforward process in Georgia, file, wait a month, and then divide what once was shared, now seemed inadequate. The evidence we were gathering would fuel a different kind of ending, one where the truth wouldn't be buried under the guise of mutual consent, but laid bare for all to see. Facing the stark reality of Dawn's infidelity, I was torn between the visceral satisfaction of a drawn-out court battle for adultery and the pragmatic approach of a no-fault divorce. The raw desire to confront Dawn and her accomplices in court clashed with the counsel of Steve, Frank, and Dave, who all advocated for the latter path, a strategy that promised efficiency and less financial strain. The promise of saving time and money, along with the opportunity to still expose Dawn's infidelity, gradually tipped the scales. Back in Atlanta, we regrouped in Frank's conference room, laying out the intel we had, pinpointing what we still needed to uncover, and strategizing the most impactful form of retribution. It was there I learned that Dawn hadn't slipped up during my St. Louis trip, but the past behavior of the Gang of Six was a different story. Their pattern of booking connecting rooms, the various combinations of members attending these getaways, it was a systematic betrayal. My frustration boiled over at the thought of their deception. I demanded Frank dig deeper into their lives. I needed profiles, marital status, children, paternity, employment, residence, a complete dossier on each one. The plan was forming to dismantle the facade of their secret lives as thoroughly as they deconstructed mine. This wasn't just about legal retribution anymore. It was about exposing a charade that had lasted nearly a quarter century. I had this crazy idea to reveal my wife Dawn's cheating right on our 25th wedding anniversary. Frank, a guy who knew her work schedule, was setting up a spy operation to catch her. It wouldn't stand up in court, but I needed to know the truth for myself. The perfect time for the big reveal was coming up. A class Dawn was teaching in Orlando, ending right before our anniversary. I told everyone that was when I'd drop the bombshell. It was going to be our anniversary, all right, but not the kind you celebrate with cake. This was a game changer for me. No more playing the clueless husband. It was time to show Dawn and her affair buddies what happens when you mess with me. I was ready to turn the tables and make them feel the pain they caused. Update: Frank just gave us the lowdown in Dave's office, and it's like something out of a soap opera. The Gang of Six, Dawn and her co-workers, have been sneaking around for over 20 years since they all started at their company. They've got this whole secret life thing down to an art. They recently had this work class in Washington, D.C., right? And Frank's team figured out their sneaky plan. Dawn and this guy, Henry, had rooms next to each other. They were super slick about it, never giving anyone a reason to suspect anything. They'd spread out all over the hotel, making sure they weren't seen going into each other's rooms. All day, they acted like they were just co-workers, but at night, they'd sneak off to their secret rooms. And get this, they only did it late at night, then sneaked back to their own rooms before anyone was up, except on specific nights like Saturdays and Thursdays. Their act was pretty convincing. During the day, they'd talk about regular stuff like where they were staying, what they were eating, what their kids were up to, and their spouses. No one would ever guess these were the same people hooking up in secret at night. They've been playing this game for 24 years, hiding everything right under everyone's noses. Frank's team, operating with their usual efficiency, collaborated with the hotel's cleaning service to collect the necessary evidence. The aftermath of the encounters in those connecting rooms provided a wealth of DNA evidence, the bed sheets saturated with the DNA of the Gang of Six, and the personal belongings left behind painted an undeniable picture. George and Chuck's unwitting paternity of Emily and Kent was confirmed, their genetic markers unmistakably present in the collected evidence. The reality of their actions, once hidden in secrecy, was now laid bare in the most indisputable manner. George C. Thomas, residing in Richmond, Virginia, with his wife and 2 adult children, was about to have his life turned upside down by the revelation of his additional daughter. Similarly, Chuck in Columbia, South Carolina, enjoying a steadfast marriage with his high school sweetheart, was on the verge of being shocked by the discovery of his extra son. Henry, with his twins in Little Rock, Arkansas, Joyce, approaching her silver anniversary in Miami, Florida, and Catherine's family in Knoxville, Tennessee, all of their seemingly content lives were reflecting the hollow perfection of my own before the truth came to light. The gang of six had everyone fooled for over 23 years, pretending they were happily married, but their little act was about to crash and burn. Seeing my own life fall apart was just a sneak peek of the mess that was about to hit them. Things were getting more complicated by the minute. Now we were questioning who really fathered Joyce's and Catherine's kids. Chances were high that the dads were part of their secret club. Frank was racing against the clock to dig up the truth, and he needed answers before next Wednesday. In Dave's office, the air was thick with bombshells. Turns out Dawn's business trip to Orlando was just a prelude to our anniversary, and boy, she didn't care one bit about the 25 years we had been married. My initial shock was swiftly followed by a cold, hard focus on the reality of our relationships. Henry, it turned out, was the father of Joyce's daughter and Catherine's son, while George and Chuck had fathered Catherine's daughters. Joyce remained the only one to have a child by her husband, a single thread of fidelity in an otherwise tangled narrative of infidelity. After taking in everything, I started to feel this cold determination. Pretending to be the loving husband while planning Dawn's downfall was like playing a dark game. I'd gone through all the sad and angry stuff, and now I was all about being strategic, just a little longer, and I could drop the bombshell. It was kind of twisted, acting like everything was fine, mirroring Dawn's own deception. She had kept up her act for 24 years, so I figured I could keep mine going for a few months. I was never the type to play this kind of game, but now it felt like payback time. Frank's crew was getting ready to do the same spying they did in Washington, but in San Diego this time. However, I was really focused on what would go down in Orlando. That's where I'd show everyone what Dawn and her gang of six had been up to. Her staying there instead of coming home for our anniversary just showed how little she cared. The plan for Orlando was bold. I'd surprise everyone by showing up as the instructor on Wednesday and let the truth out in front of everyone. Dave and his team were getting all the legal stuff ready for the big day. As it got closer, Dave, Frank, Steve, and I went over everything. We made sure we had every angle covered. Frank's team would be there, keeping an eye on the gang of six for any last-minute info. I was gearing up for the showdown. This wasn't just about exposing Dawn and her friends, it was about making a big statement. I was about to step up and change everything, and they had no clue what was coming. Update on Saturday, after Dawn left, I called up the spouses of her gang of six. I spun them a story about throwing a surprise for our 25th anniversary and asked them to join in Orlando. I arranged tickets for them, saying it was all on me. I then told Kent and Emily to come to Orlando too, saying we were going to surprise their mom. On Tuesday night, I sat them down and told them everything, about Dawn, the affair, and that I wasn't their real dad. We all cried a lot and hugged. They had a bunch of questions and I didn't hold back on the truth. I made them promise not to tell Dawn what was coming. I looked them in the eye and said I wanted them there when I confronted Dawn, but didn't want to force them. I warned them it might be rough because the news was going to hit the papers back home, and I'd be saying some pretty harsh stuff to Dawn and her friends. I told them it wouldn't change anything between us. I loved them no matter what, and in my heart, they were my kids. Kent, with tears in his eyes, asked if I could ever forgive Dawn. Emily wanted to know why we couldn't. Just try to fix things with a counselor. It was tough to stay calm, but I took a deep breath and asked them to imagine they were in my shoes, that the person they loved most had been lying to them for their whole life. It was to help them see why I couldn't just forgive and forget. In the end, I told them it was their choice to be there or not. I love them now and forever. I asked Kent and Emily to imagine they had a perfect life with their family, like a movie where everything was just right. You've got a great job, awesome kids, and you're doing all the family stuff like soccer practice and family vacations. Every day you're grateful for this life, thinking it couldn't get any better. Then I made them picture a different kind of movie. In this one, their spouse is in a hotel room, not with them, but with other people. And they're not just hanging out. They're picking cards, and when their spouse gets the ace of spades, they're super happy, but not for a reason you'd want. So I asked, do you think your wife really loves you? And Emily, I asked her to think about how she'd feel if her husband was one of the men in that room. They were upset, tears in their eyes, really feeling it. I let them sit with that for a minute before going on. Then I hit them with the hardest part. This wasn't just a one-time thing. In the movie, it's been going on for 24 years, 4 times a year. I even have videos to prove it, right on my laptop. I told them, right now, not even a mile from here, they're filming another one of those movies. I asked how they would feel if they found out they weren't the real dad to their kids, or if Emily's husband had kids with someone else. It's a tough thing to hear, and I could see it in their faces. Then I finished up by saying, the person you thought loved you is skipping out on family time just to be with these people for extra days of, well, you know. It was a lot for them to take in, and I wanted to make sure they really understood why there was no going back to how things were, why counseling wasn't an option for me. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about a whole secret life. I explained to Kent and Emily how their mom would stay 2 extra days just for sex, and then need a whole day to recover before she could be with her family. How much love, respect, and care does that show for her family? I asked them. It was clear that Dawn's actions had hurt us all deeply. Kent, fighting back tears, admitted he hadn't seen it like that before. He realized that he wouldn't want to be treated like that by his wife, and he saw how much pain this had caused me. I love you, Dad, he said, still unsure if he could face the confrontation. Emily was firm. She was angry and ready to support me, telling Kent that he needed to stand by us too. Mom chose them over us, she said, and that seemed to make everything click for Kent. I was taken aback by her passion, her determination, and I felt an immense love for both of my kids. Emily was eager to know my plan for the next day, so I told her about inviting the gang of 6 spouses to what they think is a celebration of our 25th wedding anniversary. It's going to be a shock for them, and I plan to let them see all the evidence for themselves. And by the way, I added, you've got some half-siblings you might want to meet someday. I wanted Dawn's affair to come to light in the most impactful way, and for her and her friends to face the consequences of their actions directly from their own families. Final update, the other spouses from the gang of 6 came to the hotel, and we all had a good lunch together, getting to know each other. Then, at 2 p.m., with Kent in tow, we headed to where Dawn's class was happening. Waiting for us in the hotel lobby were a lawyer from Dave's firm, a private investigator from Frank's team, and a guy to film everything that was about to go down. At 2:30, a florist dropped off the 25 red roses I ordered. Emily and the other women thought they were pretty, but I could tell Emily was amped up and ready to go. I had to remind her to stay cool because I was the one in charge of how this was going to play out. We made our way to the meeting rooms at 2:45. Emily was raring to go. Kent was keeping close to her, and the other spouses were buzzing with anticipation. I walked into Dawn's classroom at 3 p.m. with the roses and the camera guy. John was right behind me. Dawn's face turned as red as the roses when she saw me coming. I cracked a joke about it, and the room laughed. Dawn put on a smile and introduced me to the class as JT, her loving husband. As I stood there in front of the class, I locked eyes with each member of the gang of 6. Spread out as usual, a tactic of theirs to avoid suspicion. Turning back to Dawn, I started my speech about making the day memorable because of our upcoming 25th wedding anniversary. But before I could finish, Emily and the rest of the surprise group burst into the room. The photographer snapped a shot right then, catching the shock on Dawn's face and the pure panic on the faces of her affair group. I couldn't help but smile broadly as I watched the scene unfold. Emily, full of righteous fury, was taking charge, introducing Dawn to the spouses of her affair partners. I continued with my announcement, mentioning the upcoming company anniversary as well, making sure to highlight that Dawn and her colleagues had all started around the same time. I made a big show of the whole thing, with John capturing every moment on video, encouraging the guests to speak on camera later. Taking a moment to breathe and calm my pounding heart, I took in the bewildered and frightened expressions of the gang of 6. The stage was set, and it was almost time for the grand reveal. George, Henry, Chuck, Joyce, Catherine, please come up and join us, I called out. The group made their way to the front of the room while the rest of the class applauded. Emily stood by my side, and I could tell she was ready for what was about to unfold. Taking Emily by the arm, I guided her over to George. Then I said, Emily, I'd like to introduce you to George Thomas, your biological father. Dawn turned pale, and George's wife looked at me in disbelief, asking me to repeat what I had just said. George is Emily's biological father, I reiterated. George found his voice and questioned how I could be so sure. Extending my hand, the attorney placed 3 documents in it. Turning to George, I handed him the first document, explaining that it was a request for a court-ordered paternity test. Then, passing him the second document, I declared that I was suing him for 21 years of back child support and emotional trauma. Finally, I presented George with a copy of the lawsuit I was filing against his employer for failing to enforce the morality clause in his employment contract. I assured him that I already had DNA results from an independent lab confirming his biological connection to Dawn's daughter Emily, and the court-ordered test was merely a formality. Addressing George's wife, I added, "Don't worry, I have copies of all the evidence for you to use as you see fit." The classroom erupted in chaos. The other spouses, who had been unaware of the true purpose of the gathering, were in shock. At least I was enjoying myself. Kent surprised me by stepping forward, standing tall, and nodding in acknowledgement. I felt a deep sense of pride in Kent at that moment. So we proceeded to Chuck, where I introduced him to his biological father in the same manner as Emily. "Kent, I'd like to introduce you to your biological father, Charles Kent Nixon." The room fell silent when they heard Chuck's middle name. In the hush that followed, the attorney once again handed me some documents, which I went through with Chuck just as I had with George. Chuck's wife also requested copies of the evidence for her use. In the classroom, things calmed down a bit since most people thought the drama was just about Dawn and her 2 kids. But I had a bombshell ready for the rest of them. With Dawn crying in her chair, I got everyone's attention again. "This is not what you expected when I walked in," I said. "But hang on, because we're just getting started." The room fell silent. I laid it all out. I told them about the Gang of Six and their 24-year history of hooking up during these classes. I broke down the parentage of all the kids involved, leaving no doubt about the web of lies and deceit. The room erupted into chaos as the reality of the situation hit everyone. I didn't go into all the messy details, but all the legal documents were handed out. The spouses got copies, and the Gang of Six faced the music right then and there. When I gave Dawn the divorce papers, I told her we were done, no calls, no coming home, and no trying to see me. After everything settled down and I was back in my hotel room, I thought about how it all went down. Emily had thrown off my plan when she wanted to confront her biological father right away. My carefully planned script was out the window, but in the end, it didn't matter. I managed to let the Gang of Six know that they were exposed. I embarrassed them in front of everyone, and the truth was out. It was a hard, painful day, but it was also the beginning of closing a long, difficult chapter of my life. After serving them with legal papers and leaving them to face their furious partners, I started to feel a bit better about myself. Then a knock on my door brought me face to face with Emily and Kent. They had been looking after their mother, but now they were here with me, offering hugs and words of love. Emily, though angry and hurt, had the strength in her eyes. She told me she was taking Dawn home for a while. Despite everything, she felt the pull of love and duty to her mother. Emily's strength was something new I saw in her. She was fiery and resolute, and I knew Dawn would be in capable hands with her. Kent, sharing his pain and love, asked to ride back with me, seeking some normalcy amidst the turmoil. As Emily left to be with her mother, assuring me of her love, Kent stayed, and we shared a few beers, a father and son trying to find our footing on new ground. Update: it's been 5 years since the Gang of Six was exposed, and their world came crashing down. They all got fired, went through divorces, and it seems like they're always trying to outrun their past. Every time they land a decent job, their history seems to catch up, and they're back to square one. They're working on mending fences with their kids, but from what I hear, it's a long road ahead. Their exes want nothing to do with them, except maybe for the occasional financial support. After everything went down, I couldn't stay in our old house with all its memories. I checked into a hotel and started house hunting. Kent came back to Atlanta with me, but he didn't stick around long. He's doing great in Dallas, climbing the career ladder and enjoying life, though he's kept his distance from Dawn, only talking to her on the phone every now and then. Emily's more in touch with him, and they chat often. The aftermath of the Gang of Six has been tough, especially on the kids. Trust issues linger, and I wonder if Kent will ever settle down. Emily's been dealing with Dawn in her own way, taking no excuses or lies. We've all found support in others who've been through similar ordeals. The kids even bonded with their half-siblings, and we're planning a reunion in Nashville soon. It turns out Emily and Kent's names tie back to their biological fathers, which only added fuel to the fire when it all came out. Their relationship with Dawn is strained at best. As for me, I've moved on from Dawn. We settled our divorce quickly, she got the house, and I secured trusts for Emily and Kent, with the money from George and Chuck. I didn't want their money, but I wanted them to feel the sting of their actions. I've been dating, hoping to find someone new to share life and love with. I believe in love, and I'm waiting for the day I'll have grandkids to spoil. Life doesn't stop for anyone, and despite the pain, you've got to keep going. Emily and Kent needed me, and I needed to be there for them. Life goes on, and so do I, looking forward to whatever comes next and always, always remembering that cheating never leads to anything good. Payback really is well, you know.
Story 3.
I am a rural fellow named Bill Carlson. Holding an associate degree in animal husbandry, my lifelong ambition has been to possess my own feed store and raise a family. Upon completing junior college, I wedded my high school sweetheart Janice, with whom I grew up and envisioned a future. She was the only girl I ever saw myself living with, a lovely brunette with a pleasing physique that endured despite bearing 2 boys. I took immense pride in her as my wife and was prepared to do anything for her. However, Janice had one issue. She envied those who lived luxuriously. She avidly read society pages and subscribed to magazines featuring glamorous individuals. Even at the dentist's office, she pored over automobile magazines, becoming well-versed in fancy cars and designer clothing lines. She aspired for more, a desire I couldn't fulfill. I secured employment at an upscale feed store in Omaha, catering to the yuppie clientele, allowing us to be nearer to the urban center while pursuing my passion. I enjoyed my work and excelled at it, providing customers with personalized service, which the company acknowledged by granting me flexible hours. Janice initially relished city life over rural living and seemed content. However, when she chose to enter the workforce, we had to resort to daycare for the kids, who didn't seem to mind. Janice landed a position at Gilbert Medical, a medical equipment firm, which she seemed to enjoy as it provided her with the opportunity to dress up and interact with non-farmers. As her career blossomed, her interest in our home life waned, leaving me to handle the majority of childcare duties, from daycare drop-offs to meal preparation and housekeeping, while she focused on laundry, ensuring her clothing remained impeccably ironed. We diligently set aside money each month with the goal of eventually purchasing my own feed store. However, despite both of us working, our savings dwindled. Daycare expenses accounted for some, but the bulk disappeared on beauty treatments, nail salon visits, and expensive clothing purchases. I struggled to comprehend how our dual incomes resulted in diminished savings. Janice refused to address the issue, growing defensive and upset whenever I broached it, so I ceased mentioning it altogether. Nonetheless, I discreetly opened another savings account to keep separate. Meanwhile, Janice began working overtime, engaging in private phone calls, becoming less attentive in our bed life, and expressing desires for a newer, fancier car, and even contemplating chest implants. It left me with no doubt that she was having an affair. Though I'm just a simple guy from the countryside, I'm not naive. Right now, I wasn't interested in salvaging the marriage. I simply wanted to sort things out and move forward before it was too late. Since I didn't socialize with her coworkers, it was tough to pinpoint anything, but I suspected if there was anything going on, it was at her workplace. I had a couple of good buddies at work, not highly educated, but hard workers. Even though I was their boss, I didn't pull rank. The tasks got done without needing to micromanage. We all understood our roles and collaborated well, which fostered a positive relationship. Roy and Freddie would be important allies in my scheme. I noticed that on Wednesdays, Janice would dress up in fancy clothes and linger longer before heading to work. I thought this would be an opportune time to investigate. I briefed the guys on the situation, and they covered for me with my duties. That day, I parked near the entrance of the Gilbert Medical Plant lot, using the time to catch up on technical reading. Around 11 a.m., Janice left and drove to the Holiday Inn lot, parking far from her office. Shortly after, a guy arrived in a red Corvette and parked at the opposite end. Though I didn't recognize him, when he stepped out, Janice followed suit, and they entered a first-floor room, number 117, using his key. My heart sank, and I felt queasy. My suspicions were confirmed. Unsure of my next move, I decided to head back to work, taking my time to plan. Before leaving, I snipped 2 of Janice's valve stems with my wire cutters out of frustration. I'm not sure why I didn't target his. The rest of the day dragged on, and I went through the motions of picking up the kids, preparing dinner, and asking Janice about her day, to which she mentioned a flat tire. One of my coworkers changed it for her, and the incident was never discussed again. The following morning, after dropping the boys off at daycare, I swung by the plant. It didn't take long to spot the red Corvette, which conveniently had a reserved parking spot with a sign. I noted the name, Ken Beecham, distribution manager, whose wife also worked at Gilbert. By that afternoon, I had gathered plenty of information about Ken, including his marital status, past issues at work, and personal details. Although I had his contact info and even his SSN, I wasn't sure how to proceed. He'd been married to Amy for 8 years. We completed a productive day's work, and Roy, Freddie, and I managed to squeeze in one beer before I had to pick up the kids. Though uncertain about my next move, I had a feeling things would fall into place soon. Despite trying to maintain a calm and logical approach, my frustration grew daily, and occasional silent tears betrayed my inner turmoil. Feeling wounded and unable to mend myself, living with Janice became increasingly unbearable. I longed for it to be over. The following day, luck smiled on me again when I recalled that Marge Gilbert, one of my loyal customers, was married to the president of the Gilbert Medical Company. Though I hadn't met him, Marge and I had a great rapport. I made a conscious effort to be extra friendly with Marge, exploring if our connection could be advantageous. During Marge's visit with her daughter, Cindy, a vet school student, we conversed for about an hour. Enjoying our interaction, I felt a twinge of guilt after she left, but it quickly passed. Over the weekend, I spent time in the garage welding. I fashioned a small piece of flat steel with 4 sharp concrete nail points attached, my initial step toward seeking revenge through annoyance. On Tuesday, while unloading an order, I appeared more subdued than usual, catching Marge's attention. She noticed my demeanor and asked what was wrong that day, expressing concern. I responded, explaining that I was dealing with some personal issues, apologizing for not being my usual self. Sensing my distress, Marge suggested we have coffee and a chat. As we sat in her kitchen, reminiscent of a magazine spread with its stainless steel and granite decor, I couldn't help but think of how Janice would admire it. Marge placed the coffee on the table and leaned in, asking how she could help me. Reluctant to burden her with my problems, I eventually opened up, realizing it might offer some relief. I confessed that I believed my wife, Janice, was being coerced into a lovemaking relationship with one of her superiors at Gilbert Medical, though I lacked evidence. Marge inquired about the basis of my suspicion, prompting me to explain the small signs I had noticed, including finding them both together at the Holiday Inn the previous week. I admitted that Janice was unaware of my knowledge and that I was unsure how to approach the topic, expressing concern about whether she felt obligated or if it was her choice. I also shared that our family life had deteriorated, with Janice seeming indifferent toward the children and me, and that she was keeping it hidden, which bothered me. Marge asked about the individual involved, and I mentioned that I suspected his name was Ken Beecham, but was unsure of Janice's relationship with him or if they worked in different parts of the plant. I confessed that I had never met him. Marge offered to investigate discreetly, and after a moment of contemplation, I agreed, expressing a preference to avoid causing a scene. She assured me she would look into it and mentioned seeing me next Thursday for the oat delivery. I thanked her, and as I prepared to leave, suggested bringing the boys over so Cindy could meet them. Reflecting on the conversation, I felt the outcome exceeded my expectations. I was confident Janice wouldn't object to me taking the boys out, envisioning a good weekend ahead. The next morning, as rain poured, Janice carefully dressed for her day. I observed silently as I dropped the kids off at daycare before stopping by work, where the guys were ready to cover my morning shifts. Roy would use my truck for deliveries and log entries, which I would review later. Freddie brought his cousin's van, and we loaded a floor jack equipped with my steel plate. After ensuring all trucks were loaded, I departed for the Holiday Inn right on time. Janice parked in her usual spot, followed by Ken. Once they entered the room, I waited for about 10 minutes. In the pouring rain, I retrieved the jack from the van and approached Ken's car. I positioned the jack under his engine block, swiftly lifting it and puncturing the oil pan with nails. Moving to the Corvette, I repeated the process on its fuel tank. Oil and gas spilled out as I returned the jack to the van. The entire operation took less than a minute. I then disabled Janice's car once more before driving away. In my rearview mirror, I witnessed the explosion from Ken's car. As I left the lot, a sense of relief washed over me. Janice arrived home from work a bit late. Without eating supper, she headed straight to bed. I spent some time with the boys, giving them a bath and tucking them in. That night, I slept on the couch. The following morning, Janice remained in bed while I got the boys ready for daycare. We had breakfast and left, but she stayed in bed without a word, and her car was absent from the driveway. Around 9 a.m., after loading all the trucks, Lieutenant John Fritz paid me a visit. He was amiable. He inquired about my work schedule from the previous day, to which I explained it consisted of routine deliveries. I then asked if he needed verification of my whereabouts. Mentioning he obtained the delivery logs from the previous day around noon, I showed him the logs detailing each stop. He smiled and chuckled lightly, commenting on the meticulous log and asking if I maintained it daily. I offered to show logs from the past month, but he declined with a shake of his head, still smiling. Despite his demeanor, I couldn't discern whether it was positive or negative. I inquired about the reason for his visit, and after some hesitation, he explained they were investigating a car damaged at the Holiday Inn. I questioned why he involved me, and he explained my wife's car, parked nearby, had 2 valve stems cut, leading them to wonder if it was related to the incident. Expressing unawareness of why my wife's car was at the Holiday Inn, I asked about her connection to the damaged car, which he clarified belonged to a colleague she had a lunch meeting with at the hotel. When I asked if he spoke with the people they dined with, he admitted they couldn't recall their names. Pressing for a straightforward conversation, he leaned back, smiling, and mentioned someone named Ken Beecham. I affirmed that I had never met him. He seemed to believe me, expressing a preference not to get involved in domestic matters. Offering his card, he suggested I contact him if needed, and apologized for bringing the issue to my attention. As he left, I muttered about the lack of substantial information provided and the need to connect the dots. After work, upon returning home with the kids, Janice's car was in the driveway. She was casually dressed and had prepared supper, claiming she felt unwell and had called in sick. She didn't mention the previous day's events, so I didn't broach the subject. She retired early, and once again, I took care of the boys and slept on the couch. The following day, she was up and preparing for work when I left with the boys for daycare. After dropping them off, I visited the doctor's office and requested an STD check. Work proceeded as usual for a Friday. Upon returning home, Janice was there once again. After dinner, I informed her that I planned to take the boys to spend the next day at one of my customers' farms. I offered her the chance to join us, fully aware she'd find an excuse to decline. She mentioned some shopping she wanted to do, and I didn't press further. Whether it was shopping or a date, the outcome remained the same. Saturday at Gilbert's Ranch with Cindy and the boys was fantastic. We enjoyed the entire day together, with Marge preparing a wonderful lunch for everyone. I wished the day wouldn't end. Cindy bonded well with the boys, and they seemed to adore her. Unfortunately, Mr. Gilbert wasn't present, so I still didn't get to meet him. Marge didn't bring up our previous conversation, and it seemed Cindy was oblivious to it. Reluctantly, we had to head home. Janice showed no interest in our day when we returned. The boys attempted to share their adventures with her, but she disregarded them. Eventually, they gave up. She did inquire why I wasn't sleeping in the bed anymore. I explained that work-related stress caused me to toss and turn, and I didn't want to disturb her sleep. That was the last she mentioned it. The following week proceeded without incident. I noticed on her special day that she made no special preparations, leading me to assume the rendezvous for the day was canceled. This suited me fine, as I had plenty of work to catch up on. I visited a divorce lawyer I had heard about, receiving informational handouts and brochures, including fill-in-the-blank forms that caught my interest. Everything returned to normal until the following Wednesday. She began the day with a morning shower, carefully styling her hair. She wore new black lingerie, a new perfume, and what seemed to be new shoes. I made sure she didn't catch me observing, and I hurried out with the boys. I was certain this was a date. After dropping off the boys, I swung by the plant and checked his parking spot. A new Porsche Boxster occupied his slot. I noted down the license number and hastened back to work. The guys shared my excitement about the new development. We rushed through the morning deliveries and manipulated the logs once more. I'm sure John Fritz could see through our charade, but we proceeded nonetheless. We enjoyed an extended lunch break. While Roy continued with the deliveries, Freddie picked up 2 large bottles of hydrochloric acid from the swimming pool supply store. I intended to spend lunch with John Fritz. He gave me a peculiar look when I entered his office with pulled pork sandwiches, fries, and a couple of Cokes. I greeted him and sat down across from him. He sensed something was amiss and grinned broadly. I suggested we grab lunch together and catch up on the car damage case, hoping to keep him occupied for about 2 hours. It was going to be a lengthy lunch. While I kept up a friendly demeanor, Freddie was at the Holiday Inn parking lot. He located the boxer and meticulously poured acid over the trunk, fenders, and deck. He sliced the convertible top and poured acid over the leather seats and floor mats. The dashboard received its share of acid as well. As an extra measure, he deposited a box of mothballs in the gas tank. The nap, however, would wreak havoc on the engine if anyone attempted to start it. The remaining acid was spread across the top of the tires. Before leaving, he once again snipped the valve stems on Janice's car. It all transpired within 15 minutes. The only downside was not knowing how long they would be in the room. John and I engaged in light conversation for a while, until he asked what I was up to. I casually mentioned ensuring I had a solid alibi in case something happened to Ken Beecham's car that day. When John asked why that day was special, I joked about the pulled pork sandwiches being on special. After that, I called the daycare center and asked Carol to arrange for Janice to pick up the boys, explaining that I would be busy at work that afternoon. John chuckled about the delicious pork sandwiches. After a pause, John asked if he should call Mr. Beecham and inquire about his car. I questioned why he would want to do that, and provided him with Mr. Beecham's cell number and the number of the Holiday Inn room 117. John put the phone on speaker and dialed the hotel number. After a few rings, Ken Beecham answered, breathing heavily. Detective Fritz informed him that they still had no leads on who damaged his car and inquired about his new car's whereabouts. Ken seemed surprised by the call and questioned how Detective Fritz got his number. After a brief exchange, Ken mentioned his new car was in the parking lot, and Detective Fritz heard strange noises in the background. Ken abruptly ended the call, stating he needed to get dressed and check something. John grinned at me, asking if I was satisfied. After our conversation, I returned to work. Roy had the logs in perfect condition, and Freddie had discreetly disposed of the acid bottles. That evening at home, Janice picked up the boys but remained silent, going to bed early once more. The following day, John visited me and detailed all the damage to the car, explaining that Ken's insurance was pending since the Corvette incident. The car was totaled, leaving him over $60,000 in debt. Ken insisted I was involved, despite John confirming I was with him at the time. While John naturally suspected my involvement, he couldn't prove anything, nor did he seem inclined to. As for how Janice got her tires fixed, I never inquired, and no one offered any information. Since Janice hadn't come clean about the situation, I decided it was time to put an end to it all. My STD test results came back negative. I had filled out the paperwork for the lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings. I planned to visit the Gilberts' ranch with the boys this weekend, just in case Cindy was there. If not, we'd spend the day with Marge. The only loose end was lacking evidence of the extramarital affair. The weekend was pleasant. Cindy was present, much to the kids' delight, and we all enjoyed ourselves once more. We felt like a family again, and I missed that, as did the boys. Cindy remained unaware of the situation, but at least she didn't inquire. Before I departed, Marge reassured me with a wink, saying everything would be all right. I was offered a new position about 100 miles away, offering more pay, a better job, and the option to buy into the business in a few years. It seemed perfect, except for the fact that we wouldn't be near Cindy. The following Wednesday, Janice dressed up again. I wasn't sure what kind of car her boyfriend used, but she was clearly preparing for another rendezvous with him. I assumed they were still meeting at the same place. I knew I had to take action, but I hadn't formulated a plan yet. The guys and I were brainstorming when Marge Gilbert pulled up. She signaled for me to approach and silently drove us to the plant. Parking in the back, we entered through a private entrance straight to Mr. Gilbert's office. Marge facilitated introductions, and his secretary brought us coffee. We engaged in small talk for a while, until I finally asked, "Did you bring me here for a reason?" Mr. Gilbert chuckled and mentioned it was time to resolve the situation. He informed me that Marge had briefed him on what was happening, and they had conducted an internal investigation. He assured me that by the end of the day, I would have all the necessary information. He apologized in advance if anything he did caused me damage. We engaged in more conversation, and Marge noticed my grin when Cindy was mentioned. I attempted to conceal it, but did a poor job. Suddenly, the phone rang, catching everyone's attention. Mr. Gilbert received an update and confirmed that everything was set. He explained that Ken and my wife were in their usual room at the Holiday Inn. Ken had driven a company vehicle there, which violated policy, so it was being brought back to the plant. Unfortunately, my wife's car had a couple of flat tires, which seemed to be a recurring occurrence. He then put the phone on speaker and dialed the room. Mr. Gilbert called Ken and informed him of the urgent need to discuss something. Ken seemed surprised and asked what the matter was and how Mr. Gilbert got his number. Mr. Gilbert brushed off the question and explained that the legal department had been alerted to a potential lovemaking annoyance situation. He asked if there was a female employee from their company with Ken. After a moment of silence and indistinct background chatter, Ken confirmed that she was there. Mr. Gilbert asked if she was there willingly or if she was being coerced or threatened. Ken assured him that she was there of her own accord and that the relationship was consensual. Mr. Gilbert expressed appreciation for Ken's honesty on the sensitive issue and stated that they would prepare a statement to confirm the consensual nature of the relationship. He then requested to speak with the young lady. After some background noise, Janice came on the line and asked how she could assist him. Mr. Gilbert asked if Ken coerced or threatened her to accompany him there. Janice confirmed to Mr. Gilbert that Ken hadn't threatened her, and the relationship was consensual. Mr. Gilbert expressed relief and informed them that when they returned to the plant, the statements would be ready for them to sign. He asked to speak with Ken again. Upon Ken's return to the phone, Mr. Gilbert instructed him to come back to the plant for signing papers in the legal department. After hanging up, Mr. Gilbert suggested to Marge that she take me out for lunch and return in a couple of hours once the legal team had finished their work. We enjoyed a fantastic lunch, and although I wanted to express my gratitude, I refrained from doing so. Eventually, Marge convinced me not to discuss the matter or what was done ever again. She also made me promise not to mention anything to Cindy. That was a positive sign. I informed Marge about my new job offer, and she was happy for me and the boys. After lunch, we went back to the plant, where I obtained notarized copies of Ken and Janice's statements. Both confirmed they had engaged in consensual closeness outside their marriage. The legal team assured me this would be sufficient for my lawyer to proceed with the divorce. Ken and Janice were terminated from their positions. Their belongings were packed before their arrival, and they were escorted out of the building. Unfortunately, neither of them had a car. Marge provided me with her card to use temporarily, and I promised to return it the following day. I dropped off the documents at the lawyer's office. She made multiple copies of each, which I intended to send to Ken's wife. I closed our bank accounts, paid off and canceled all credit cards, and arranged for the utilities to be disconnected. On Friday afternoon, I visited John Fritz and assured him I had behaved. He chuckled and mentioned that he had informed the landlord about not renewing the lease next month. Additionally, he had given notice at work, noting that they were supportive but disappointed about his departure. Freddie accompanied me to the Gilbert Ranch with my truck so I could return Marge's car. It was time to pick up the boys and head home. I dreaded walking through the door. Janice's car wasn't in the driveway. When we entered, she was sitting on the couch crying. This was the first time she had shown any emotion at all. 2 file boxes containing her personal belongings from work were nearby. I fed the boys and put on the TV for them. I stood by her, giving her an opportunity to speak if she wanted. She expressed her frustration, stating that I had to interfere and ruin everything in her life. She questioned why I couldn't mind my own business and accused me of not having the right to interfere with hers. I was astonished that she still viewed the situation as solely concerning her, showing no concern for the children or me, nor considering Ken's wife, Amy. Our family, our life, and our plans meant nothing to her. Her only focus was her own actions at that moment. I felt relieved that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life with her. Without a word, I went upstairs and took a shower. Later, while getting the boys ready for bed, she retreated to the bedroom and shut the door. The next day, I took the boys with me to work, ensuring there were no loose ends and that Roy and Freddie could manage the system I'd established. We gathered boxes from stores for the move. Passing by the Holiday Inn, I noticed Janice's car was gone, presumably repaired by now. Fixing the flat tires likely took a toll on her shopping budget for the past month. Janice wasn't home when we returned. We only took clothes and toys, leaving everything else for her to dispose of. She didn't know that by the next day, all the utilities would be shut off. Damn, I was ruthless. As we backed out of the driveway, Janice pulled in. She stood by her car, watching us drive away. I took the boys to Chuck E. Cheese and stayed at a motel overnight. The next morning, I dropped them off at daycare. I gave Carol cookies and party favors, explaining it was their last day, and I wanted them to enjoy it with their friends. Before leaving, she pulled me aside and asked about my wife's behavior the previous week. She explained that she didn't want to pry, but since I was leaving, she was curious. She mentioned that my wife seemed furious when she called, demanding to know where she got the number. When she mentioned that I gave it to her, my wife started cursing. Although my wife didn't say anything when she picked up the children, she could tell she was really angry. She apologized for involving Carol, admitting she set her up. She revealed that Janice was having an affair and was at the Holiday Inn with her boyfriend. She hoped that by Carol calling and interrupting their party, Janice would reconsider, but it didn't work, and Janice got mad at both of them. She mentioned that she would be serving Janice with divorce papers that afternoon and would be leaving with the boys for a new job right after picking them up. She acknowledged it was a low blow on her part and apologized for involving Carol. Later, I went to see my divorce lawyer, who had everything ready. I would have custody of the kids, and Janice could have visitation rights whenever she wanted. This arrangement was fine with me, as I didn't think she would be interested in them anyhow. Everything else was split 50-50, but there wasn't much to divide. There was no alimony, child support, or cash settlements. I left her all the furniture, appliances, and household items. I really didn't want them. She kept her car, which I didn't want because it kept getting flat tires. All I had to do was give the papers to Janice. Unless she contested it, everything would be final in 3 months. A copy of Ken and Janice's notarized statement was attached to the divorce paperwork. The lawyer's note indicated that the statements would remain private if all terms were agreed upon. There were no questions. Her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I sat there for a while. I had loved Janice. She was the only girl I was ever close to. I assumed our relationship was normal and didn't realize I wasn't meeting her needs. She never directly communicated, and I was too oblivious to pick up the clues. I had failed her in many ways. While her actions were deceitful, I felt some of it was due to my inattention. It felt strange knocking on my own door. She opened it, looking tired. She asked if I wanted a drink. I handed her the papers. Without opening them, she looked at them, and then back at me. I asked, "Why?" I couldn't tell if she was angry or sad. After a pause, she expressed her thoughts, highlighting the disparities between them. She pointed out the contrast in scents, noting his aftershave compared to your fertilizer-like odor. The distinction extended to their clothing choices, with him favoring Armani suits while you preferred jeans. Their dining preferences also diverged, as he indulged in lobster while you savored ribs. The dissimilarities continued with his London fog coat juxtaposed against your Carhartt attire, and his fancy car opposed to your truck. She remarked on the state of their nails, with his being manicured and yours consistently dirty. Additionally, she emphasized the difference in their professional statuses, with him having a real job while you were perceived as just a farm boy. She conveyed regret for their marriage, confessing that her initial reasons were misguided, seeking an escape from her parents through the relationship with Bill without considering the long-term consequences. Despite this apology, her sentiments remained unaltered. She professed love for her children, but simultaneously expressed regret for having them, admitting a lack of maternal instinct. The pursuit of someone to fulfill her dreams, she realized, did not bring the satisfaction she anticipated, but left her feeling more dissatisfied with her current circumstances. She acknowledged misleading Bill and acknowledged being an inadequate mother to their children. However, she did not regret the pursuit of her dreams and the quest for something better. In response to my inquiries about his wife, her demeanor swiftly changed. Instead of remorse, she exhibited anger and a refusal to feel sorry for her actions. She communicated a strong desire to follow the life she had always imagined: a husband with a farm boy background and 2 children with unkempt appearances. She asserted her independence, stating that she didn't need assistance and already had the necessary documents. She concluded by urging me to leave so she could proceed with her chosen path in life. Well, that simplified things. I turned and walked out. When I picked up the boys, Carol said to let her know if I needed more phone calls. I called the utility companies and told them not to disconnect until the end of the month. I felt a little sorry for her. The divorce was final in 3 months. I never heard from Janice. The lawyer said everything went smoothly. My new job was great. However, I missed out on the opportunity to buy the business. Someone else got it, along with prime land. They planned to turn it into a horse breeding farm. My job was secure, but my chance at owning my own place took a setback. 2 weeks later, construction started next to the feed store. We speculated about what was being built until one of the guys asked the site engineer. It was a vet clinic for large animals. They completed the building in less than 60 days. The new owner was due to show up Saturday. On the way to lunch, the boys suddenly yelled, "Cindy! Cindy!" There she was, looking better than ever, with Marge. Cindy had become a veterinarian and wanted to raise show horses while running a large animal clinic. She was building a house nearby. We all went to lunch together, and Cindy shared her plans. The boys and I were beaming all the way home that night. 5 years later, Cindy had a successful clinic and horse breeding venture. I owned 6 feed stores. The boys had 2 baby sisters they adored. My mother-in-law Marge and Mr. Gilbert visited every weekend. I never learned his first name, and Janice never visited the boys. Second story. I'm at a loss for where to begin. It's devastating to realize my wife no longer wants to live with me. What's worse is her refusal to provide a reason. She's resistant to moving in with me, and my mother supports her in this decision. Allow me to provide some context. I'm a 51-year-old man who had to leave my hometown 13 years ago for work, leaving my wife, Mona, who is 48, and our 2 children in Texas. They are now 23 and 21, residing independently in Houston. Around 14 years ago, during the U.S. recession caused by the housing bubble, our business collapsed overnight. With my father's passing and me running his construction business, everything fell apart. Balancing the care of my mother, 2 school-age kids, and my wife became overwhelming in such an unstable economy. After depleting all our savings, I had no choice but to make the tough decision to move out. After exploring opportunities in various Asian countries, I eventually established my business in Dubai. Though challenging, the drive to provide for my family kept me going. After leaving Texas, it took me over a year before I could return home to establish my new venture. Since then, I visited home every 5 to 6 months. I desired to bring my family with me, but Mona and the kids were reluctant due to concerns about disrupting their schooling. Last year, when my youngest daughter finished college and secured a job, I planned to visit home to spend time with her. During that visit, I suggested to Mona that we relocate here now that the children have moved out, but she declined, fearing leaving my mother alone. I proposed bringing my mother along, but they both opposed the idea of leaving their hometown, citing the vast cultural differences in the Middle East. They had valid concerns, so I didn't press further. During my last visit home, I shared with Mona my intention to wrap up things in Dubai and return to Texas. I anticipated her excitement, but instead, she reacted unhappily. I inquired why she didn't want us to live together, and she explained she was content but puzzled why I'd leave everything behind. While she had a point about the sacrifices made to establish myself in Dubai, after 13 years away and with our children grown, I longed to return to my comfort zone. I reassured her about our finances and plans to establish something in Texas given the improved economy. However, she remained unconvinced, which raised concerns for me, though I gave her the benefit of the doubt. The next morning, my mother dropped by unexpectedly and advised against my quick decision to return. Since I hadn't shared my plans with her or anyone else, it must have been Mona who informed her. I was taken aback. Similar to Mona, my mom's concern made me doubt myself. I began to wonder if I was making a mistake and ultimately abandoned the idea. However, I couldn't shake off the distress caused by my wife's reluctance to live with me. While her reasoning might make sense, I felt devastated by Mona's emotional distance. This feeling consumed me so much that upon returning home, I reduced my calls and texts with her. I hoped she would notice and inquire, but she seemed indifferent to whether everything was okay. There were days when I didn't reach out, and she didn't either. Over time, her communication became purely transactional, indicating that she no longer relied on me. So last month, I confronted her, questioning if she still loved me. She dismissed it as overthinking, explaining that she was busy caring for the household and my aging mother. I was at a loss for words. It's uncommon for a wife to bond so well with her mother-in-law and care for them. While I appreciated Mona's kindness to my mom, my unease grew daily. I couldn't comprehend why she didn't want me home when we already had our own house. Our major responsibilities were fulfilled, and I reassured her that our lifestyle wouldn't suffer. It just didn't make sense. Yes, I considered the same possibility as you all might be thinking. Perhaps she found someone else, but how could I uncover the truth? She hadn't shown any other signs until now. She had been a fantastic mother, bravely raising our children during my absence. It wasn't easy. She fulfilled all her roles gracefully. Sometimes I feel guilty for suspecting her, but you know how challenging long-distance relationships can be. Update. Mona had been having an affair, and my mother had known all along but never told me. I can't understand why I deserved this fate. I arranged a surprise trip home without informing anyone, not even my mom. As I entered my house, I dreaded encountering Mona with her lover. It's somewhat ironic, given the stories I've heard about cheating spouses of deployed spouses. Thankfully, that scenario didn't unfold. Mona was in the kitchen when I used the spare key to enter the house. She was visibly shocked to see me. To conceal my surprise visit, I brought a bouquet. Although Mona seemed surprised, she also appeared suspicious of my unexpected arrival and bombarded me with questions. I explained that I had light work that month, prompting me to come home. Mona managed a forced smile, pretending to be pleased, but it was clearly insincere. Over the next few weeks, I painstakingly uncovered the truth. I resorted to tactics I'm not proud of, but I felt I had no choice. I snooped through her phone, listened in on her conversations, planted a GPS tracker in her car, and trailed her around town. This investigation yielded information bit by bit, painting a clear picture of what was happening in my absence. It transpired that she had been seeing someone for the past 8 years. Upon my return home, Mona was unusually guarded about her phone, unlike before, when she would clean up all evidence. This time, she didn't have the chance. Although I attempted to snoop through her phone on the first day, I was unsuccessful. When I eventually gained access, I found nothing incriminating. She likely wiped it clean at the first opportunity. The affair came to light when I tracked her movements using a GPS device in her car. Initially, I didn't suspect anything when I observed her entering a hardware store. However, upon waiting for her return, I noticed the owner closing the shop. It left me feeling dizzy. Hours later, I saw Mona leaving the shop, and the owner reopened it once her car had departed. I considered entering the shop to confront her lover, but I hesitated, fearing he might recognize me and ruin my plan. I patiently waited for her next visit, hoping to catch them in the act. She typically ventured out in the afternoon, sometimes visiting my mom with friends or relatives. I followed her everywhere, hoping to catch her with her paramour. Finally, yesterday, she went to visit my mom. Ordinarily, I refrained from following her further on such occasions, which is why it took me so long to catch them. But yesterday, I remained vigilant and witnessed them leaving the house together. It didn't strike me as suspicious at the time. I assumed they were heading for shopping or some other errand. Though I initially resisted the urge to follow them, something compelled me to do so. They stopped at the hardware store, and my heart sank when I saw her lover greet them. Both Mona and my mom exited the car. Her lover kissed Mona in front of my mom, and they conversed briefly. Then, he hugged my mom before she got back in the car and drove off. Mona and her lover entered his shop, and he closed the shutter behind them. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Betrayal from one's spouse is one thing, but betrayal from one's own mother is unimaginable. The truth overwhelmed me to the point where I had to take a few moments to catch my breath before proceeding to the shop. My knocks went unanswered, so I persisted until her lover finally opened the door. I demanded to know where Mona was, and he froze. I pushed past him and stormed into the shop. Before he had a chance to respond, the lights went out, and I heard a faint voice from the storeroom. Hastily, I rushed in to find my wife lying exposed, pleasuring herself and calling out for someone else. It lasted only a moment before someone else leaped at me and dragged me out as Mona screamed loudly. The scene was so chaotic that it took me a while to grasp what was happening. I struck the intruder and broke free. By then, Mona had emerged, hastily covering herself. I seized her by the arm and demanded to know how long this had been going on, but Mona intervened, pleading for us to discuss it at home. Aware I could face consequences for the altercation, I backed off, exited, and drove away. I headed to my mom's place. Bursting inside, I shouted accusations, convinced she was aware. Mona had already informed her, as my mom's lack of surprise indicated. She simply cried and held my hand, urging me to calm down. I collapsed emotionally. Soon, Mona joined us. Seeing her face only fueled my anger. I implored them both to tell me the truth. After much prodding, Mona confessed to feeling deeply lonely during my absence, for 13 years. I had been so consumed with work that I had little time for her. My calls were brief check-ins about the kids and Mom. But what about me? I demanded to know how long this had been going on. She admitted, perhaps 7 or 8 years. Shocked, I felt like a fool. I had toiled abroad for years to provide for my family, only to find this betrayal waiting for me at home. I questioned why she hadn't sought a divorce if our connection had deteriorated so much. She broke down again, insisting she loved me, and the affair was solely to alleviate her loneliness. He meant nothing to her, she claimed. I couldn't believe it. I turned to my mom, asking how I deserved such betrayal from her. She wept, pleading for understanding, explaining Mona had been caring for her. Once I had all the answers, I rose to leave. They tried to stop me, but I warned them not to. I instructed Mona not to return home, needing time alone. Driving back, I felt nauseous, unsure how to process it all. Was this affair truly my fault for sacrificing so much for my family? Update. I spent the following days deeply immersed in sorrow. Afterwards, I drove to Houston to see my grown daughters. They weren't children anymore. They deserved to know what their mother had been doing while I provided for them. I also did it to protect myself. My intention was to leave the country, fearing Mona might manipulate my daughters against me. They were devastated by the truth. The older one even suspected Mona and my mom were up to something. She also mentioned suspecting my mom of seeing a widower nearby. However, that was not my concern. My dad had passed away years ago, so my mom could do as she pleased. Yet, she supported Mona, causing problems for me. The following day, I packed up and returned home. Mona and Mom had been calling incessantly. Since then, I think they came home to find an empty house, facing reality. Initially, I left them for a month. The calls and texts were filled with apologies, pleading for my return. But eventually, they became concerned about money. I intentionally didn't block them, wanting to see their anxiety. Without funds, I froze my bank accounts and credit card. They panicked, realizing they had no income. Mom's state pension wasn't enough to sustain their lifestyle. They tried everything to reach me, but I ignored them. Mom resorted to emotional manipulation, claiming my late father would be heartbroken. Their pleas fell on deaf ears. I never suspected Mona. I never checked her phone like people in long-distance relationships do, but I always respected her privacy more than Mona. I felt betrayed by my mom sometimes, especially when I sensed something was off with Mona. Witnessing their strong bond made me feel betrayed in return. Their excuse for covering up Mona's affair was weak. Feeling lonely, she chose to cheat? She felt alone despite having family and friends around? Compared to her, I was lonelier, literally alone in a foreign land. I could have done the same, but I didn't. I was focused on my family's well-being, working hard to save and return home. When their attempts to contact me failed, they reached out to my daughter for help. Mona didn't know I had told the truth to the girls, and she did exactly what I expected. She spoke ill of me in front of them, alleging I had cut them off financially or was having an affair. However, my daughters saw through her lies and confronted her, driving her away that day. But Mona continued to reach out to my younger daughter, exploiting her innocence for money. However, I won't intervene. She's an adult who knows what to do. Mom has also reached out to my daughter for financial help. As for me, I'm still unable to move on from the feeling of betrayal. I haven't considered divorce yet. Divorce would be financially and personally beneficial for Mona if she wants to marry someone else. However, I won't pursue it. She's already living in my house. and that's the most she can get from me. Being out of the country with no accountability, whether divorced or not, doesn't matter to me. I'm focused on moving on with my life. Update. After cutting off their financial support, they exhausted all possible resources. While my older daughter refused to assist, the younger one was manipulated into helping. However, her earnings from her low-paying first job barely cover her essentials. Despite this, she's saving some to assist her mother, which made me proud. Eventually, she became overwhelmed and suggested Mona find employment to support herself. But Mona took her assistance for granted, insisting it was her daughter's duty to care for her. Despite doing her best with her limited income, my younger daughter reached her breaking point and ceased providing support. Unable to marry someone new while still married to me, Mona has been pressuring me for a divorce. She's threatened legal action, but I'm unfazed. Being abroad, I doubt she has the resources or knowledge to pursue legal action across borders. Plus, in this country, there are no legal consequences for abandoning a cheating spouse. So, good luck to her with that. Currently, Mona works at her partner's shop, though I'm unsure of her compensation, whether it's money or something else. Her partner doesn't even have a proper home, residing in a camper, and his financial situation seems inadequate to support Mona as far as my mom is concerned. Sometimes, I feel guilty for cutting her off and consider helping her out. However, she receives a pension that should suffice for her needs. She brought this situation upon herself. Perhaps I'll reconcile with her in the future, but not now. Although she's apologized, it didn't feel sincere. I'll wait until she truly regrets her actions and my anger subsides, allowing love to prevail. Some advise me to move on and enjoy the vibrant lifestyle of Dubai, but it's not all as glamorous as portrayed on social media. It requires a substantial amount of money. Moreover, the legal landscape regarding women is stringent here, and I'm not interested in using women to cope with my grief. However, I've been traveling extensively since then, exploring places like China and Bali, with plans to visit more Asian countries and experience their cultures.
Story 4. The smell of antiseptic clings to my skin as I trudge up the driveway, my boots heavy on the cracked concrete. Another night shift at Cedar Springs Memorial Hospital ends just as the sun peaks over the horizon, painting the sky in muted pinks and oranges. I pause for a moment, letting the crisp Michigan air fill my lungs. It's a futile attempt to shake off the weight of the past 12 hours. The screams of pain, the beeping monitors, the constant dance between life and death. I'm Tyler McCoy, 35 years old, and for the past decade, I've been an EMT in this small town where everyone knows your business before you do. It's a far cry from the chaotic foster homes I bounced between as a kid, but sometimes I wonder if the adrenaline rush of emergency medicine is my way of chasing that old familiar chaos. As I fumble with my keys, my eyes drift to the window of my daughter's room. A soft glow seeps through the curtains, and my brow furrows. It's barely 6 a.m., way too early for Lily to be up, especially on a Saturday. I quietly open the front door, stepping into the hushed warmth of our modest home. The floorboards creak under my feet as I make my way upstairs, my concern growing with each step. When I reach Lily's room, I gently push the door open. "Lily," I whisper, peering inside. My heart sinks at the sight before me. Lily, my beautiful 8-year-old, is huddled in the corner of her bed, blanket pulled tight around her small frame. Her blue eyes, so much like her mother's, are wide with fear, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. "Daddy," she cries out, reaching for me. I'm by her side in an instant, gathering her into my arms. She buries her face in my chest, her little body shaking with sobs. Hey, it's okay," I murmur, stroking her tangled blonde hair. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Did you have a bad dream?" Lily pulls back, hiccuping as she tries to catch her breath. "And no, Daddy. I saw a ghost." I freeze for a moment, then force a small chuckle. "A ghost? In our house?" She nods vigorously. "It was tall and dark, and it moved funny, like it was floating." I scan the room, taking in the scattered stuffed animals and the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Everything looks normal, peaceful even. But the terror in Lily's eyes is real, and it tugs at something deep inside me. "Well, I say, keeping my voice light. I don't see any ghosts now. And you know what? Ghosts aren't real. They're just stories people tell to scare each other. Lily's lower lip trembles. But I saw it, Daddy. I really did. I cup her face in my hands, looking directly into her eyes. I believe that you think you saw something, sweetheart. Our minds can play tricks on us sometimes, especially when we're tired or scared. But I promise you, there are no ghosts in this house. You're safe here. She doesn't look entirely convinced, but some of the tension leaves her small body. I glance at the clock. 6:15 a.m. Too early to start the day, but I know there's no way Lily's going back to sleep now. How about we go downstairs and make some hot chocolate? I suggest. Then you can tell me all about this ghost, okay? Lily nods, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. I scoop her up, blanket and all, and carry her downstairs to the kitchen. As I set her down on a chair, I hear soft footsteps behind me. Everything okay? Marissa's sleepy voice drifts from the doorway. I turn to see my wife leaning against the frame, her dark hair a mess and her eyes still heavy with sleep. For a moment, I'm struck by how beautiful she is, even in her ratty old t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. Then I notice the slight furrow in her brow, the tension in her shoulders. It's been there a lot lately, and I push down the nagging worry that's been growing in the pit of my stomach. Lily had a bit of a scare, I explain, moving to the cupboard to grab the hot chocolate mix. Says she saw a ghost. Marissa's eyes widen slightly, and she moves to Lily's side. A ghost? Oh, honey, is that why you're up so early? Lily nods, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. It was scary, Mommy. It was in the hallway, and then it came into my room. I watch as Marissa wraps an arm around Lily, but there's something off about her reaction. A flicker of what? Nervousness? Guilt? It's gone before I can place it, replaced by a soothing smile. Well, you're safe now, Marissa says, her voice gentle. There's no such thing as ghosts, sweetie. It was probably just shadows from the trees outside your window. I finish making the hot chocolate and set a mug in front of Lily, who wraps her small hands around it gratefully. As she sips, some color returns to her cheeks, and I feel a wave of relief wash over me. So, I say, settling into a chair across from her, tell me more about this ghost. What did it look like? Lily's brow furrows in concentration. It was really tall, taller than you, Daddy. And it was all dark, like a shadow. But not like a normal shadow. It moved weird, like it was floating instead of walking. I nod, trying to piece together what could have caused such a vivid hallucination. And where exactly did you see it? First in the hallway, Lily says, her voice dropping to a whisper. I got up to go to the bathroom, and when I opened my door, it was just there. Then it came into my room, and I hid under my blanket until you came home. I glance at Marissa, who's been unusually quiet during Lily's retelling. She's staring into her own mug of hot chocolate, her fingers tapping in erratic rhythm on the ceramic. Marissa, I prompt, did you hear anything last night? She looks up startled. What? Oh no. I slept through the night. You know me. I could sleep through a tornado. It's true, Marissa has always been a heavy sleeper. But something about her response doesn't sit right with me. Before I can dwell on it, Lily speaks up again. Can I sleep in your room tonight? She asks, her eyes pleading. Just in case the ghost comes back. Marissa and I exchange a look. We've been trying to encourage Lily's independence, but after a scare like this... Of course, sweetie, Marissa says, running a hand through Lily's hair. Just for tonight, okay? Lily nods, relief evident on her face. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting warm light through our kitchen windows, the tension of the early morning slowly dissipates. We spend the rest of the day trying to keep Lily's mind off her ghostly encounter. We play board games, watch her favorite movies, and even bake cookies together. But as night falls, I can see the fear creeping back into Lily's eyes. She insists on keeping every light in the house on, and she practically attaches herself to either Marissa or me, unwilling to be alone for even a moment. When bedtime rolls around, Lily is practically vibrating with nervous energy. We set her up on an air mattress in our room, surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals. I sit with her until she falls into a fitful sleep, her small hand clutching mine tightly. As I slide into bed next to Marissa, I can't shake the unease that's been building all day. Do you think we should be worried? I whisper, careful not to wake Lily. Marissa rolls over to face me, her eyes glinting in the dim light from the hallway. About what? The ghost. I sigh, running a hand through my hair. No, not the ghost. About Lily. She's never been this scared before, not even after watching those horror movies at her cousin's house. Marissa is quiet for a long moment, and when she speaks, her voice is tight. She has an active imagination, Tyler. Kids go through phases like this. Remember when she was convinced there was a monster under her bed? This feels different, I insist. She really believes she saw something. And what do you think she saw? Marissa's tone is suddenly defensive. You don't actually believe in ghosts, do you? I shake my head. Of course not. But something scared her, Marissa. Really scared her. I can't help but worry. Marissa sighs, reaching out to touch my cheek. You're a good father, Tyler. But sometimes you worry too much. Lily will be fine. This will blow over in a few days, you'll see. I want to believe her. But as I drift off to sleep, Lily's terrified face haunts my dreams. The next few days pass without incident, and I start to think that maybe Marissa was right. Maybe it was just a phase, a product of Lily's vivid imagination. But then, on my next night shift, everything changes. I drag myself through the front door just as dawn is breaking, my body aching from a particularly rough night. All I want is a hot shower in my bed, but the sound of muffled sobs stops me in my tracks. I find Lily in the living room, curled up on the couch, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched to her chest. Her face is red and blotchy from crying, and when she sees me, she launches herself into my arms. Daddy, she wails, it came back. The ghost came back. My heart sinks as I hold her close, feeling her little body tremble against mine. Shoo, it's okay, I murmur, even as my mind races. You're safe now. I've got you. When Lily calms down enough to speak, what she tells me chills me to the bone. It was in the house again, she hiccups. But this time it was near Mommy. I freeze, my blood running cold. What do you mean near Mommy? Lily pulls back, her blue eyes wide and serious. I saw it standing next to Mommy in the hallway. It was really close to her, Daddy, like they knew each other. For a moment, I can't breathe. My mind conjures up 1,000 possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. But I force myself to stay calm, to be the steady presence Lily needs right now. Okay, I say, keeping my voice even. Let's go find Mommy and talk about this, all right? We find Marissa in the kitchen, already dressed for her shift at the boutique. When she sees Lily's tear-stained face, she rushes over. Lily, honey, what's wrong? She asks, kneeling down to Lily's level. I watch Marissa carefully as Lily recounts her story. I see the color drain from my wife's face, the way her hands shake slightly as she smooths Lily's hair. Oh, sweetie, Marissa says, her voice trembling slightly. It was just a bad dream. There's no ghost, I promise. But there's something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, fear? I can't quite place it, but it sets off alarm bells in my head. Marissa, I say, keeping my tone neutral. Can I talk to you for a minute? In private. She nods, avoiding my gaze. I ask Lily to wait in the living room and follow Marissa into our bedroom, closing the door behind us. What's going on? I ask, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. Marissa wraps her arms around herself, a defensive posture I've seen too many times lately. What do you mean? Nothing's going on. Lily had a nightmare, that's all. I take a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Marissa, our daughter is terrified. She's convinced she's seeing a ghost, and now she's saying this ghost was standing next to you. I need you to be honest with me. Is there something you're not telling me? For a moment, I see panic flash across Marissa's face. But then it's gone, replaced by a look of indignation. Are you seriously accusing me of something? Based on a child's nightmare? I'm not accusing you of anything. I say, even as doubt gnaws at my insides. I'm just trying to understand what's happening in our home. Marissa's laugh is bitter, cutting. What's happening is that you're working too much, Tyler. You're tired, you're stressed, and now you're seeing conspiracies where there are none. Her words sting, but I press on. Then explain to me why Lily is so scared. Explain to me why she's suddenly seeing this ghost everywhere. I can't explain it. Marissa snaps. Kids have nightmares, Tyler. They get scared of shadows and creaky floors. It doesn't mean there's anything sinister going on. We stare at each other for a long moment, the air between us thick with unspoken accusations and doubts. Finally, Marissa sighs, her shoulders slumping. Look, she says, her voice softer now. I know you're worried about Lily. I am too. But accusing me of whatever it is you're accusing me of, it's not going to help anyone. I run a hand over my face, suddenly feeling every hour of my sleepless night. You're right, I concede. I'm sorry. I feel helpless, Marissa. I don't know how to make this better for Lily. Marissa's expression softens, and for a moment, I see a glimmer of the woman I fell in love with. She steps closer, resting a hand on my arm. We'll figure it out together, okay? Maybe we should think about getting Lily to talk to someone. A child psychologist or something. I nod, grateful for the suggestion, even as my heart aches at the thought of my little girl needing professional help. Yeah, that might be a good idea. As Marissa leaves for work, and I tuck an exhausted Lily into bed, I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on than meets the eye. The look on Marissa's face when Lily mentioned the ghost being near her, it wasn't just surprise or concern. It was fear. Real, palpable fear. I spend the day researching child psychologists in the area, but my mind keeps drifting back to Lily's words. The ghost standing close to Marissa, like they knew each other. The way Marissa has been distant lately, always on her phone, staying up late. By the time evening rolls around, I've made a decision. It's not one I'm proud of, but I can't shake the feeling that it's necessary. While Marissa is giving Lily her bath, I slip out to the 24-hour electronics store in the next town over. An hour later, I'm back home with a bag full of small, high-definition cameras with night vision capabilities. I tell myself it's just to put Lily's mind at ease, to prove to her once and for all that there are no ghosts in our house. But deep down, I know I'm looking for something else, something I'm afraid to put into words. As I install the cameras in the hallway, the living room, and near Lily's bedroom, my hands shake. This feels like a violation, a breach of trust. But then I remember the terror in Lily's eyes, the strange behavior from Marissa, and I steel myself. Whatever is going on in this house, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. That night, as I lie awake listening to Marissa's steady breathing beside me, I stare at the ceiling and wonder what the cameras will reveal. Will they show nothing but empty hallways and shadows? Or will they confirm the nagging suspicion that's been growing in the pit of my stomach? Either way, I know that once I view that footage, nothing will ever be the same. The next week crawls by in a haze of exhaustion and unease. Every night, I come home to find Lily more withdrawn, dark circles forming under her once bright eyes. Marissa grows increasingly distant, her smiles forced and her touches fleeting. The cameras I installed loom over us, silent witnesses to the growing tension in our home. Finally, after another grueling shift at the hospital, I steel myself to review the footage. Lily's at school, and Marissa's working at the boutique. The house is quiet, almost oppressively so, as I settle in front of my laptop. My hands shake as I pull up the first night's recordings. The hallway outside Lily's room is bathed in the soft glow of her nightlight. For hours, nothing moves. I fast forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Then, at 2:17 a.m., a shadow flickers at the edge of the frame. I lean closer, squinting at the screen. A tall, dark figure glides into view, moving with an unnatural smoothness that sends chills down my spine. Jesus, I mutter, rubbing my eyes. For a moment, I wonder if Lily's fears have somehow infected me, making me see things that aren't there. But then the figure steps into the light, and my blood runs cold. It's not a ghost or a shadow. It's a man, a flesh and blood man in my home, in the middle of the night. I watch, horrified, as he moves towards our bedroom. My finger hovers over the fast-forward button, a part of me desperate to skip whatever comes next. But I force myself to keep watching. The bedroom door opens and Marissa steps out. There's no surprise on her face, no fear. Instead, she smiles a warm, intimate smile I haven't seen in months. The man pulls her close, and they kiss passionately before disappearing into the guest room. I slam the laptop shut, ball rising in my throat. The room spins around me as the truth sinks in. Marissa, my wife, the mother of my child, has been sneaking a lover into our home. Into the home where our daughter sleeps. Fuck, I growl, standing up so quickly my chair topples over. I pace the room, my mind racing. How long has this been going on? Is this why Marissa's been so distant? And Lily. Oh God, Lily. Her ghost was real, in the worst possible way. I want to confront Marissa immediately, to scream and rage and demand answers. But a small, rational part of my brain holds me back. I need to be smart about this, for Lily's sake, if nothing else. Over the next few days, I watch more footage, piecing together the timeline of Marissa's betrayal. The man, I still don't know his name, comes almost every night I'm on shift. Sometimes they talk in hushed voices in the kitchen. Other times, they don't make it past the living room before tearing at each other's clothes. Each revelation is a fresh wound, but I force myself to document everything. If it comes down to a custody battle, I need all the evidence I can get. Marissa notices the change in me. One night, as we're cleaning up after dinner, she cornered me by the sink. "Tyler," she says, her voice soft with concern that now sounds false to my ears. "What's going on with you lately? You've been so distant." I have to bite back a bitter laugh. "Have I?" I reply, not meeting her eyes. "I hadn't noticed." She reaches out to touch my arm, and it takes everything in me not to flinch away. "Come on, Ty. Talk to me. Is it work? Is it Lily's nightmares? You know you can tell me anything, right?" The irony of her words is almost too much to bear. I turn to face her, searching her eyes for any sign of guilt or remorse. There's nothing but practiced concern. "Can I?" I ask, my voice low and dangerous. "Can I really tell you anything, Marissa?" She draws back slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "Of course you can. Tyler, you're scaring me. What's this about?" For a moment, I consider laying it all out right then and there, but Lily's voice drifts in from the living room, reminding me of the collateral damage my words could cause. I force a smile that feels more like a grimace. "It's nothing. Just tired, I guess. Long shifts, you know?" Marissa doesn't look convinced, but she nods slowly. "Okay, well, if you want to talk, I'm here." As she walks away, I have to grip the edge of the sink to keep from calling her out on her lies. The next night, I decide I can't take it anymore. I need answers, and I need them now. After Lily goes to bed, I confront Marissa in the living room. "We need to talk," I say, my voice steadier than I feel. Marissa looks up from her phone, surprise etched on her features. "Okay," she says cautiously. "What about?" Instead of answering, I walk over to the TV and plug in my laptop. Marissa watches, confusion turning to alarm as I pull up the video files. "Tyler, what is this?" she asks, her voice rising slightly. I turn to face her, my heart pounding. "This," I say, hitting play, "is the ghost Lily's been seeing." The color drains from Marissa's face as she watches herself on the screen, wrapped in the arms of her lover. She makes a choke sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. "Tyler," as she starts, but I cut her off. "Don't!" I snap. "Don't you dare try to explain this away." "How long, Marissa? How long have you been sneaking him in here?" Tears stream down her face as she collapses onto the couch. 3 months, she whispers. "It's been going on for 3 months. The admission hits me like a physical blow. 3 months. 90 nights of betrayal, of lies, of putting our daughter at risk. Who is he? I demand. Marissa shakes her head, burying her face in her hands. "His name is Ethan," she says, her voice muffled. "Ethan Blackwood. He's a client. From the photography business." I laugh, a harsh, bitter sound that makes Marissa flinch. "A client. Of course. And I suppose it was just business when you started fucking him in our home?" "It wasn't like that," Marissa pleads, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Tyler, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I roar, forgetting for a moment that Lily is asleep upstairs. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months?" How you let our daughter think she was going crazy, seeing ghosts, when it was just your goddamn lover sneaking around. Marissa breaks down completely, her body racked with sobs. I'm sorry, she wails. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I stand there, watching her cry, and feel nothing. The anger is still there, burning hot in my chest, but it's overshadowed by a deep, aching emptiness. I want a divorce, I say quietly. Marissa's head snaps up, fresh horror dawning on her face. Tyler, no. Please, we can work this out. I'll end it with Ethan, I swear. We can go to counseling. We can know. I cut her off. We can't. You didn't just betray me, Marissa. You betrayed Lily. You put her in danger, bringing a stranger into our home night after night. How can I ever trust you again after that? She reaches for me, desperation clear in every line of her body. Tyler, please. I love you. I love our family. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. Give me another chance. I step back, out of her reach. I've already called a lawyer. I tell her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I'm filing for divorce first thing in the morning, and I'm going for full custody of Lily. You can't do that, Marissa gasps. She's my daughter too. You can't take her away from me. I'm not taking her away, I say, my voice hard. I'm protecting her. From you, and from the choices you've made. I turn away, unable to look at her shattered expression any longer. I'm taking Lily to my sister's place tomorrow, I say over my shoulder. We'll stay there until I can find us a new place. You can have the house. You and Ethan. As I walk out of the room, Marissa's sobs follow me, a haunting melody of a life falling apart. The next morning, I wait until Marissa leaves for work before I sit Lily down for the hardest conversation of my life. Hey, sweetheart, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk about something important. Lily looks up at me, her blue eyes wide and trusting. What is it, Daddy? Is it about the ghost? My heart clenches. Sort of, I say. Lily, you remember how you said you saw the ghost near Mommy? She nods solemnly. Yeah. It was standing really close to her, like they knew each other. I take a deep breath. Well, sweetie, it turns out it wasn't a ghost after all. It was a man, a friend of Mommy's. Lily's brow furrows in confusion. A friend? But why was he here at night? And why did he look all shadowy? That's a complicated grown-up thing, I say, struggling to find the right words. The important thing is, you don't have to be scared anymore. There are no ghosts in our house. Then why do you look so sad, Daddy? Lily asks, her perceptiveness catching me off guard. I pull her into a hug, fighting back tears. Because sometimes, even grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people they love. Mommy made a big mistake, and because of that, some things are going to change. Lily pulls back, fear creeping into her voice. What kind of changes? We're going to go stay with Aunt Sarah for a while. I explain gently. And then you and I are going to find a new place to live, just the two of us. What about Mommy? Lily asks, her lower lip trembling. I swallow hard. Mommy's going to live here. But you'll still see her, I promise. It'll just be different. Lily bursts into tears, and I hold her close, my own eyes burning. I know it's scary, I murmur into her hair. But I promise you, everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. As I rock my crying daughter, I silently vow to do whatever it takes to give her the stable, loving home she deserves, even if it means rebuilding our lives from the ground up. The next few weeks pass in a blur of lawyer meetings, house hunting, and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for Lily's sake. I take a leave of absence from work, using up vacation days I've been hoarding for years. One afternoon, as I'm packing up the last of our things from the house, there's a knock at the door. I open it to find a police officer standing on the porch. Mr. McCoy? He asks, his expression grave. I nod, a knot forming in my stomach. That's me. What's this about? The officer glances around, then lowers his voice. Sir, we need to talk about Ethan Blackwood. My blood runs cold at the name. What about him? He's a person of interest in several ongoing investigations, the officer explains. Fraud, extortion, and, well, sir, there's no easy way to say this. We have reason to believe he may have been using his relationship with your wife to case your home for a potential burglary. The world tilts on its axis as the officer's words sink in. All this time, I thought Marissa's betrayal was the worst of it. But this is a whole new level of horror. Jesus Christ, I mutter, running a hand over my face. I have security footage of him in the house. Would that help? The officer's eyes widen. That would be extremely helpful, Mr. McCoy. Would you mind coming down to the station to give a statement? I nod numbly, my mind racing. As I follow the officer to his car, I can't help but wonder, how much worse can this nightmare get? The answer, as it turns out, is much worse. Over the next few days, the full extent of Ethan Blackwood's crimes comes to light. He's not just a petty thief or a con man. He's a serial predator who's been targeting vulnerable women across the state, using them to gain access to their homes and their lives. And Marissa, my Marissa, fell right into his trap. When I finally see her again, at a meeting with our lawyers, she looks like a shell of herself. Her eyes are hollow, her skin pale and drawn. Tyler, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know what he was. Part of me wants to scream at her, to shake her and demand how she could have been so blind. But looking at her now, I realize she's as much a victim as anyone. I believe you, I say quietly. But it doesn't change anything, Marissa. We can't go back. She nods, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know. I'm so sorry, Tyler. For everything. As I watch her walk away, I feel a strange mix of anger, pity, and relief. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, is gone. But in her place is the truth, painful and ugly as it may be. That night, as I tuck Lily in a bed in our new apartment, she looks up at me with those wise, too old eyes. Daddy, she says softly, is Mommy a bad person? I pause, choosing my words carefully. No, sweetheart. Mommy's not a bad person. She made some bad choices, and those choices hurt us. But she loves you very much. Lily nods, processing this. And the ghost man? Was he a bad person? I swallow hard. Yes, Lily. He was a very bad person. But he's gone now, and he can't hurt us anymore. She's quiet for a long moment, then reaches up to wrap her arms around my neck. I'm glad you're not a bad person, Daddy, she whispers. I hold her tight, my heart swelling with love and determination. I'll always be here for you, Lily. I promise. No matter what. As I turn out the light and close her door, I take a deep breath. The road ahead won't be easy. There will be custody battles, therapy sessions, and countless moments of doubt and fear. But looking at Lily's peaceful face as she drifts off to sleep, I know it's worth it. We've weathered the storm, faced our ghosts, and come out the other side. And together, we'll build a new life. One filled with love, trust, and the unshakable bond between a father and his daughter. The next few weeks pass in a blur of legal meetings, hushed conversations, and sleepless nights. The police investigation moves forward, though slower than I'd like. Officer Dan keeps me updated, his voice a mix of professional detachment and personal concern each time he calls. We've identified the man in the footage, Dan tells me one afternoon. I'm on break at the hospital, huddled in a corner of the staff room with my phone pressed tightly to my ear. Who is he? I ask, my free hand clenching into a fist. His name is Ethan Blackwood, Dan says. And Tyler, he's got a history. My stomach drops. What kind of history? Dan sighs heavily. Multiple affairs with married women, for one. But there's more. He's been involved in some shady business dealings. Nothing we could ever pin on him conclusively, but let's just say he's not the kind of guy you want around your family. I close my eyes, feeling a mixture of anger and relief. Anger at what this man has done to my family. Relief that at least now I know who he is. What happens now? We're bringing him in for questioning, Dan explains. The footage you provided gives us grounds to investigate further. And Tyler, there's something else you should know. What is it? I ask, bracing myself for more bad news. We've had reports from other women in town. Seems Blackwood has a pattern of manipulating his way into homes, using his relationships to gain access. In some cases, items went missing, valuable things. The implications hit me like a punch to the gut. You think he was using Marissa to case our house? To steal from us? It's a possibility we're looking into, Dan confirms. Has anything gone missing from your home recently? I rack my brain, trying to think through the fog of recent events. I'm not sure. I've been so focused on Lily and the divorce. I haven't really been paying attention to our things. Understandable, Dan says gently. But when you get a chance, do a thorough check. If anything's missing, no matter how small, let us know. It could help build our case against Blackwood. After hanging up, I lean against the wall, letting the cool plaster ground me as I process this new information. Marissa didn't just betray our marriage. She potentially put our entire family at risk. The thought makes me sick. When I get home that evening, Lily is already in bed. The babysitter, a kind teenager from down the street named Emma, greets me with a sympathetic smile. How is she today? I ask, hanging up my jacket. Emma's smile falters slightly. She was okay. A bit quiet. She asked about her mom again. I nod, a familiar ache settling in my chest. Thanks, Emma. I appreciate you being here for her. After Emma leaves, I find myself standing in the doorway of Lily's room, watching her sleep. She looks so peaceful, so innocent. I make a silent promise to her, and to myself, that I'll do whatever it takes to protect her, to give her the stable, loving home she deserves. The next morning, I wake up early and start going through the house, cataloging our belongings. It's a surreal experience, like taking inventory of a life that no longer exists. I'm halfway through when my phone buzzes with a text from Marissa. Marissa, can we talk? It's important. I stare at the message for a long moment, debating whether to respond. Finally, I type out a reply. Me okay. Coffee shop on Main in an hour? Marissa, I'll be there. Thank you. An hour later, I'm sitting in a booth at the back of Rosie's Cafe, a steaming cup of black coffee in front of me. The bell above the door chimes, and I look up to see Marissa walk in. She looks different, smaller somehow, less put together than I'm used to seeing her. Tyler, she says softly as she slides into the seat across from me. Thank you for meeting me. I nod, not trusting myself to speak just yet. Marissa orders a tea from the waitress, then turns back to me, her hands clasped tightly on the table. I heard about Ethan, she starts, her voice barely above a whisper. About the investigation. How? I ask, surprised. We've been trying to keep things quiet for Lily's sake. Marissa looks down at her hands. Cedar Springs is a small town, Tyler. People talk, and Officer Miller came to question me yesterday. I lean back, processing this. What did you tell him? Everything, Marissa says, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. I told him everything, Tyler, about how I met Ethan, how he manipulated me. I was so stupid, so blind. Why are you telling me this? I ask, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. Marissa takes a shaky breath. Because you deserve to know the truth. And because I think Ethan might have stolen something from us. Something important. My blood runs cold. What? What did he take? Your grandfather's watch, Marissa says, her voice breaking. The one he left you in his will. I noticed it was missing a few days ago, but I was too ashamed to say anything. I thought maybe I had just misplaced it, but now. I close my eyes, feeling a fresh wave of pain wash over me. That watch was one of the few things I had left of my grandfather, a man who had been more of a father to me than my own dad ever was. Tyler, I'm so sorry, Marissa continues, reaching across the table as if to take my hand before thinking better of it. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know, I never meant for any of this to happen. I was feeling lost, and Ethan, he made me feel special. But it was all a lie. Everything was a lie. I opened my eyes, studying the woman across from me. The woman I once loved, the mother of my child. I see regret in her eyes, genuine pain. But I also see the damage she's caused, the trust she's broken. What do you want from me, Marissa? I ask, my voice tired. She shakes her head. Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you. I wanted you to know the truth. And I wanted to tell you that I'm leaving town for a while. My sister has offered to let me stay with her in Chicago. I think it's best for everyone if I get some distance, get my head straight. I nod slowly. What about Lily? I'll call her. Write to her, Marissa says, wiping at her eyes. But I think you were right before. She needs stability right now. And I'm not in a place to provide that. You're a wonderful father, Tyler. She'll be okay with you. As much as I want to feel anger, to lash out at Marissa for all the pain she's caused, I find myself feeling a mix of sadness and pity. I hope you find what you're looking for, Marissa. For Lily's sake, if nothing else. Marissa nods, standing up. Take care of her little girl, Tyler. And take care of yourself, too. As I watch her walk away, I feel a chapter of my life closing. It's painful, but there's also a sense of possibility, of a fresh start. The next few days are a whirlwind. The police arrest Ethan Blackwood, charging him not only for the break-ins at our house, but for a string of similar incidents across town. It turns out he'd been running a sophisticated scheme, using his charm to worm his way into people's lives and homes, then robbing them blind. When Officer Dan tells me they've recovered my grandfather's watch, I feel a weight lift off my shoulders. We found it at a pawn shop 2 towns over, he explains. The owner remembered Blackwood. He's cooperating fully with our investigation. Thank you, I say, my voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to me. Dan clasps my shoulder. You're a good man, Tyler. You and Lily deserve some peace after all this. As the dust begins to settle, I realize it's time for a change. The house, once a source of comfort, now feels tainted by memories of betrayal and fear. After a long talk with Lily, we decide it's time for a fresh start. We find a small house on the other side of town, closer to the hospital where I work. It's nothing fancy, but it's bright and open, with a small backyard where Lily can play. As we stand in the empty living room after signing the lease, Lily tugs on my hand. Daddy, she says, her blue eyes wide. Is this really our new home? I kneel down to her level, smiling. It sure is, sweetheart. What do you think? Lily looks around, her expression serious. It's smaller than our old house. I nod. It is, but you know what? Sometimes smaller can be better. It means we'll always be close to each other. A smile breaks across Lily's face. Like a big hug? I laugh, pulling her into my arms. Exactly like a big hug. And you know what else? This house doesn't have any ghosts. Not even pretend ones. Lily giggles, burying her face in my shoulder. Good. I don't like ghosts anymore. As we begin to settle into our new home, I can see Lily starting to heal. The dark circles under her eyes fade, replaced by the sparkle of curiosity and joy that I'd feared was lost forever. She still has nightmares sometimes, but they're becoming less frequent. When they do come, I'm there to hold her, to remind her that she's safe and loved. One evening, as I'm tucking Lily into bed in her new room, she asks the question I've been dreading. Daddy, she says, her voice small, is Mommy ever coming back? I sit on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. Mommy needs some time to figure things out, sweetie. She loves you very much, but right now, she needs to be away for a while. Lily's lower lip trembles. Did I do something wrong? Is that why she left? No, absolutely not. I say firmly, pulling her into a hug. You didn't do anything wrong, Lily. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes that hurt the people they love. But that's not your fault. It's never your fault. Lily nods against my chest, her small body shaking with silent sobs. I hold her until she calms down, stroking her hair and whispering words of comfort. You know what? I say as she pulls back, wiping her eyes. I have an idea. Why don't we write Mommy a letter? We can tell her all about our new house and your new school and anything else you want to share. Lily's eyes light up. Can we? Really? I nod, smiling. Of course. We'll do it tomorrow after school, okay? As I turn out the light and close Lily's door, I lean against the wall, taking a deep breath. It's not easy navigating this new reality. But seeing Lily's resilience, her ability to find joy even in the midst of so much change, gives me hope. The next few weeks are a blur of new routines and adjustments. I throw myself into work, grateful for the distraction and the sense of purpose it provides. My colleagues at the hospital are supportive, covering shifts when I need to be there for Lily and offering words of encouragement. One day, As I'm restocking supplies in the ambulance, Jake approaches me, a concerned look on his face. "Hey, Tyler," he says, leaning against the vehicle. "How are you holding up?" I shrug, focusing on the task at hand. "I'm okay. Taking it day by day, you know?" Jake nods, then clears his throat. "Listen, some of us were thinking, it's been a while since you've had a night off. Why don't you let us watch Lily this Saturday? Give you a chance to decompress a bit." I look up, surprised by the offer. "I don't know, Jake. Lily's still adjusting to everything. All the more reason for her to spend some time with her extended family." Jake interrupts, grinning. "Come on, Tyler. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take a night for yourself. We got you covered." After some more persuasion, I finally agree. That Saturday, I find myself at O'Malley's, surrounded by friends and colleagues. It feels strange at first, being out without the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. But as the night goes on, I feel something loosen in my chest. For the first time in months, I laugh without restraint, sharing stories and jokes with the people who have stood by me through this ordeal. As last call approaches, Jake raises his glass. "To Tyler," he says, his voice carrying over the din of the bar. "The best damn EMT in Cedar Springs, and an even better father. We got your back, man. Always." The chorus of cheers that follows brings tears to my eyes. I blink them back, raising my own glass in response. "To all of you," I say, "I couldn't have made it through this without you." When I get home that night, I find Lily fast asleep on the couch, surrounded by my co-workers' kids. They build a blanket fort in the living room, empty pizza boxes and board games scattered around. The sight makes me smile, a warmth spreading through my chest. As the weeks turn into months, life settles into a new normal. Lily thrives in her new school, making friends and throwing herself into her studies with enthusiasm. I watch her grow stronger, more confident, and I feel a fierce pride in her resilience. Marissa keeps her word, calling Lily once a week and sending letters filled with stories of her life in Chicago. It's not ideal, but it's something. I can see the way Lily's face lights up when she hears her mother's voice, and I'm grateful that at least this connection remains. One crisp autumn evening, as Lily and I are raking leaves in our small backyard, she turns to me with a serious expression. "Daddy," she says, leaning on her child-sized rake. "Are you happy?" The question catches me off guard. I pause, really thinking about it. "You know what, sweetheart? I am. It's been a tough year, but yeah, I'm happy. Are you?" Lily nods, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am. I miss Mommy sometimes, but I like our new house. And I like that you're happy." I pull her into a hug, leaves crunching under our feet. "I'm so glad to hear that, Lily. You know, as long as we have each other, we'll be okay." As we stand there, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead won't always be easy, I know that. There will be challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt. But looking at Lily, seeing the strength and joy in her eyes, I know we'll face whatever comes together. The ghosts of our past no longer haunt us. Instead, we're building a new life, one day at a time. And as I look towards the future, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time: hope.